When dinosaur fossils were first pulled from the ground, the appearance of the creatures was anyone's guess. And how they lived was beyond comprehension. But from Argentina to Wyoming, great discoveries and bold new thinking suggest these ancient creatures were faster, more agile, and more complex than once imagined. "65 million years after the last dinosaurs vanished, they're more popular than ever. They've escaped from museums and invaded our popular culture, spawning a renaissance of the dinosaurs." For over 150 million years, a group of animals unlike any today ruled our planet. The dinosaurs. Their great success demands that we understand them. But their remains are silent. Today, scientists like Jack Horner are struggling to find what they were really like. Horner is one of the paleontologists responsible for redefining our modern image of dinosaurs. His groundbreaking discoveries and keen insights have helped answer questions that have lingered for more than 100 years. His pioneer status attracts volunteers from all over the United States to Montana for his crash course in dinosaur excavation. The students live in traditional Native American teepees, designed to withstand howling winds that sweep off the nearby Rocky Mountains. Horner believes that the focus of paleontology is changing.
By tonight it's
Instead of settling for knowing what dinosaurs looked like, we now need to know how they lived.
In the old days, people were looking for display pieces. They were looking for things to put in museums. So they would go out, they would find a dinosaur, they were looking for individual dinosaurs, and they were looking for something big. So they'd go out, they'd find a dinosaur, they'd dig it up, they'd bring it back, they'd prepare it, they'd put it on display, and then they'd go look for another one. And they weren't doing science. It was more in line with sort of the P.T. Barnum spirit. Nowadays, most of us, I think, are very interested in how dinosaurs live.
In the 1970s, Horner's research led him to the debate over the link between dinosaurs and birds, an issue that's nagged paleontologists almost since the beginning of the science. As early as 1839, dinosaurs were classified as reptiles, even though some had hip bones like modern birds. Not much was made of the similarity until 1861, when an astonishing fossil was pulled from a German quarry. Named Archaeopteryx, it looked like a small dinosaur, but with one major difference: it had feathers. Some scientists would later declare it the missing link between birds and dinosaurs. But others refuted the idea because it lacked the specialized collarbone, a wishbone considered to be the fundamental trait of birds and their ancestors. The dinosaur bird theory gathered academic dust for 100 years. In 1978, Horner found some hard evidence to all but resolve it. A chance encounter in a Montana rock shop led him to the discovery of a lifetime. Horner and a colleague were in their first year as excavators when they stopped at a small fossil shop in Bynum, Montana, not far from the Canadian border. The owners were delighted when Horner was able to identify some of the fossils on display.
The bones that she had found turned out to be a large duck-billed dinosaur. And as I was leaving the shop, she said, "Oh, by the way, there are a couple little bones here I would like you to look at." And she pulled out two tiny little bones, both of which I immediately recognized as baby duck-billed dinosaur bones.
Horner was astonished. He knew how incredibly rare baby dinosaur bones were and how much could be learned by finding more. The shop owners agreed to close up early and take the dinosaur hunters to where the bones had been found. In pasture lands just east of the Rocky Mountains, they showed Horner the source. It would become the wellspring from which most of his future research would flow. He proceeded to uncover numerous bones of baby dinosaurs buried in a bowl-shaped depression that he determined was a nest. It was a historic find. The first nest of baby dinosaurs ever discovered. What's more, that bones belonged to a previously unknown kind of duck-billed dinosaur. Nearby, he discovered hundreds more bowl-shaped depressions and realized that he'd found an entire nesting area. Many of them held fossilized eggs. He called the new site Egg Mountain. Only once before had dinosaur eggs and nests of this scale been found. In 1923, the American Museum of Natural History in New York sent the flamboyant Roy Chapin Andrews on a lavish expedition to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. The expedition found a total of 50 eggs, individually and in nests. They wrapped their treasures in camel hair and loaded them in crates to carry home. Horner's find was even more impressive. It yielded eggs, babies, and for the first time, actual dinosaur embryos inside their eggs, 70 to 80 million years after they were formed. The discoveries gave him the chance to study the development of dinosaurs from embryo to hatchling to adult. Much of his research focused on one question. After dinosaurs hatched, did they act more like birds or like reptiles? Reptiles emerge from the egg with strong legs and are able to fend for themselves right away. But hatchling birds are too weak to care for themselves. A parent must remain at the nest, feeding them until they can stand on their own, a significant behavioral difference. Horner suspected that at least some dinosaurs cared for their young, as birds do. He looked for evidence in the eggs and the bones of the baby dinosaurs. The eggs were deposited in clusters, and it often takes brute force to free them from the surrounding rock. A more delicate touch is used to scrape away the finer particles. Finally, the specimens are wrapped in burlap and plaster to be transported back to the museum for further study. In the lab, Horner and his colleagues began experiments to determine if baby dinosaurs could stand on their own when they emerged from their eggs. They needed to look at the structure of the hatchling's leg bones. Strong bones meant they could stand on their own and leave the nest like reptiles. Weak bones would suggest more helpless, bird-like behavior. Could a discovery combined with ingenuity bring us closer to understanding dinosaurs? It has before. Every discovery advances our knowledge of what the dinosaurs were really like. And it goes beyond science. The more dinosaur experts learn about these bizarre creatures, the more fascinating they become to the public. Throughout the world, hundreds of museums display thousands of dinosaur fossils to satisfy the growing interest. And if people can't get to the museum can sometimes come to them. DinoFest International is an annual exhibition of dinosaurs and ancient life from around the world. In 1996, in a 2-week period, nearly 200,000 people flocked to see prehistory come alive. They were joined by world-renowned dinosaur experts, artists, and merchandisers. DinoFest was the brainchild of paleontologist Don Wolberg at the Philadelphia Academy of Natural Sciences.
We have dinosaurs for the first time put in one place from every continent. So there are people interested in the wonderful animals from China, dinosaurs from Canada, US. Of course, T-Rex is extremely popular and unpopular. Scares some kids.
Scaring kids and adults alike are the recent Jurassic Park movies, which have tallied the highest box office receipts of all time. But perhaps the most stunning example of the public's soaring fascination with dinosaurs was seen at Sotheby's. In 1997, the New York auction house put Sue, the most complete T-Rex skeleton yet found, on the block.
At $700,000, now bidding at $800,000, now bidding at $900,000, now bidding at $9. At $900,000, now bidding at $9. At $900,000 now, 2 bids at $1 million. At $1 million, now bidding at $1 million. Now $1.1 million, $5.4 million. Telephone up front, 5.5, 5.6, 5.7. 3 places, 5.7's in the center of the room still. It's up front then at $7,600,000. Fair warning then at $7,600,000. Up here. $7,600,000.
The highest bidder was the Field Museum in Chicago. For a single specimen, it spent $7.6 million. It was the most ever paid for a dinosaur. It seems that 65 million years after their extinction, dinosaurs are conquering the Earth again. Today, what remains of these once flourishing creatures is enough to draw huge crowds and excite the imaginations of scientists and the public alike.
If I were a dinosaur, which dinosaur would I want to be? The biggest one.
If I was a dinosaur, I think I would want to be Tyrannosaurus Rex.
I think I'd like to be a turtle and watch dinosaurs.
The Triceratops.
A brontosaurus.
Maybe. T-Rex.
For me, they were the hook that captured me in a career in science. And among the topics I care about are dinosaur extinction, how they lived, what they ate, recreating worlds of the ancient past.
DinoFest is just one of the latest events that brings the dinosaurs world back to life. For over a century, scientists have displayed their discoveries to an admiring public, even as they struggled to understand what these creatures were really like from the first meager discoveries. The first public display of dinosaurs was in 1854. It occurred at Crystal Palace Park, just outside of London. Some 40,000 people came to see life-size sculptures of long-vanished creatures. On the banks of a man-made lake stood replicas of many ancient animals. And on islands lurked the most popular sculptures by far, the dinosaurs. Huge and hulking. For the first time ever, scientists had collaborated with artists to put flesh on their bones. Each reconstruction represented the best that science had to offer. It was thrilling and a bit strange to a public just getting used to the concept of extinction. Recreating three-dimensional sculptures from the bones of extinct animals had been a tremendous undertaking. English sculptor Benjamin Hawkins was hired to build the creatures under the supervision of scientists. But very few dinosaur bones had been found by 1853, so the sculptures required some educated guesswork. Hawkins used a mix of creatures as his models: lizards, crocodiles, and rhinoceros. He labored for years on the project. As it neared completion, he held an unusual dinner party. Distinguished guests were served inside the belly of an unfinished dinosaur model. Hawkins had good reason to celebrate. The Crystal Palace exhibition became the crowning glory of a new science that was just beginning to understand dinosaurs. Through the ages, people had probably always come across dinosaur fossils, but had no idea what they were. In the 3rd century AD, dinosaur bones discovered in China were thought to be the remains of dragons. Ancient Greeks believed they were from a race of giants. It wasn't until the 18th century that Europeans, on the brink of the Industrial Revolution, started to question what the strange bones found in their mines and quarries were all about. When the first bones were found, the idea of extinction and the age of the Earth were virtually unknown. No one understood where the bones could have come from or how old they were. But the work of a few leading scientists would soon provide an explanation. In 1799, French anatomist Georges Cuvier began comparing the newly discovered bones to those of living creatures. He noted similarities and declared the bones were very old and the animals they came from no longer existed. It was a radical idea that launched the science of paleontology, the study of ancient life. In 1818, Oxford professor William Buckland applied Cuvier's ideas to a partial skeleton he found in an English quarry. He noted the similarity to bones of modern reptiles and named this new creature Megalosaurus, or Great Lizard. 5 years later, English Dr. Gideon Mantell found a huge jaw. The teeth resembled those of an iguana, so he called the creature Iguanodon. As more discoveries came to light, English anatomist Richard Owen in 1841 published a paper in which he classified these new creatures in a single group called Dinosauria, meaning terrible lizards. From then on, they would be known as the dinosaurs. Later, Owen would supervise Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins as he recreated the new discoveries at Crystal Palace. They were works of tremendous imagination, but were based on limited information and riddled with inaccuracies. Megalosaurus was shown as merely a scaled-up version of a generic reptile, ambling on 4 legs. Now we know it stood upright, a swift, 2-legged predator like T-Rex. Iguanodon was also shown as a 4-legged behemoth, with a spike on its nose. Today we know Iguanodon ran on 2 legs. The horn on its snout was actually a defensive spike protruding from its thumb. The sculptures, more fanciful than real, created an image of dinosaurs as giant, lumbering lizards. But the creators of the Crystal Palace exhibition did the best they could with the little information they had. In the following decade, the picture of dinosaurs would begin to change. Across the Atlantic, knowledge of dinosaurs grew with the discovery of more fossils. As settlers flooded the American West in the 1870s, fossils began turning up in the exposed sediments of the dry and barren regions called Badlands. Soon museums in the East sent prospectors to Wyoming and Montana to hunt dinosaurs. They came back with new and far more complete specimens than any found before. As the diggers brought in one new kind of dinosaur after another, scientists vied to classify and name them. The work became an obsession for paleontologist Othniel C. Marsh of Yale and Edward Drinker Cope of the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. Both were extremely ambitious, and both were after the same thing: to outdo each other by discovering and identifying the most dinosaurs. Their bitter competition took many forms. In 1868, Marsh pointed out that Cope, in a scientific journal, had put the head of the giant sea reptile Elasmosaurus on the wrong end. Mortified by his mistake, enraged at Marsh, Cope tried to buy back all copies of the journal before they reached his peers. When a new fossil bed was uncovered in 1877 at Como Bluff, Wyoming, both Cope and Marsh sent crews to stake their claim. Rival prospectors were said to engage in fistfights, even smashing fossils in the opposing camp. On one expedition, Marsh hired 2 Army scouts as escorts. One of them was William F. Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill. As thorny as it was, the competition between Cope, Marsh, and other dinosaur hunters produced a huge trove of fossils. They uncovered many new species, producing a great leap in our knowledge of dinosaurs. Soon others would head west to dig up prehistory. One of these pioneers was Barnum Brown of the American Museum of Natural History in New York. In 1902, he discovered the bones and teeth of a giant carnivore. He sent his treasure back to the museum for study. So impressive were the bones that director Henry Fairfield Osborn dubbed the frightening new predator Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. Beginning in 1897, the public image of the new discoveries was shaped by artist Charles Knight. Originally hired by Cope and Osborn to portray dinosaurs in scientific journals, Knight was soon commissioned to paint reconstructions of the beasts for magazines and museums. Early in his career, Cope and Osborn asked him to paint and sculpt their dinosaurs as agile and active, running, jumping, and fighting. Quite a change from the Crystal Palace dinosaurs. By the 1920s, the idea of dinosaurs as quick and dynamic caught Hollywood's imagination, as seen in The Lost World in 1925. The depiction, though loosely based on scientific theory, was probably chosen more for its thrill potential. By the 1940s, for some unknown reason, science had returned to its previous view of dinosaurs as slow-moving, cold-blooded, and dim-witted. Knight reflected this view in 1942, when he wrote and illustrated an article for National Geographic magazine. He described the dinosaurs as harmless and stupid, and showed them lumbering across the landscape, dragging their tails or wallowing in swamps. Soon, pop culture would embrace that image. Moronic, plodding dinosaurs began turning up around every corner. But in the last 20 years, our knowledge has soared with the bounty of new fossils. In the 1960s, a fresh crop of paleontologists was making new discoveries and re-examining old assumptions. What they found led them to question the notion of dinosaurs as lumbering beasts. Blazing the path was a brash young paleontologist named Bob Bakker. In 1969, he began arguing that although dinosaurs shared some features of slow-moving, cold-blooded reptiles, anatomically, they looked more like agile, warm-blooded animals. Nearly 30 years later, he continues to find evidence to support his ideas. Like this trackway in central Wyoming, where a herd of dinosaurs once crossed a mudflat. Their tracks are now preserved in stone.
This is the front paw of a great 10-ton brontosaur squishing in and pushing up the mud as it walked. No claw print. The thumb would be there. Great big claw held off the ground. And behind it, the much larger hind paw carrying 3 times as much weight with 3 claws. 1, 2, 3. All chisel-edged, facing outwards. And there are probably several hundred of these guys all walking the same direction. These tracks go 100 yards that way, 50 yards that way. This was one big herd, adults and babies. Crisscrossing the trackways of the brontosaur herd are meat-eating dinosaurs. Some little ones maybe this tall, roughly the weight of a coyote, and some taller, roughly the weight of a big mountain lion, 300-400 pounds. What they were doing, I don't know, but some of them were moving pretty fast. Some of them were going around back the brontosaur herd, some cutting in the front, probably trying to keep out of the way, maybe looking for the small fry, stirred up by these, this enormous weight of unstoppable herbivores.
From the spacing of their prints, Bakker has determined the meat-eating dinosaurs were as fast and agile as mammals.
There's a simple equation that lets you calculate how fast these dinos were going, if you know how tall they were and how long the stride was. Now this meat eater, it's about as tall as I was. Look at this. Can barely do that. I can't walk comfortably with that stride. This guy was running. He was going about 14 miles an hour. Some of the tracks that have been found nearby indicate speeds of up to 40 miles an hour in spurts, and the average speed of all these meat eaters is 7 miles an hour. That's a good clip. That's the clip that coyotes and wolves and hunting dogs and hyenas use when they're scurrying around looking for food. That's a hot-blooded pace.
In 1986, Bakker presented his radical ideas to the public in his book, The Dinosaur Heresies. In it, he illustrated his theories with his own drawings, showing how the anatomy of the dinosaurs made them faster and more agile than reptiles. It was groundbreaking and controversial, but slowly won over many of his critics. He believes past notions about dinosaurs are the result of scientists trying to fill in the missing pieces of a complex puzzle.
This is a wonderful head. This is the head of a kind of brontosaur. This is the head that was on Brontosaurus itself in all the big movies, King Kong, the original Lost World, 1925. This head is a powerful head. It's got these huge teeth here for crushing plants and leaves, a big nostril for hooting, pretty big eye to a wonderful head. And when I grew up on the Brontosaurus skeleton in New York, this wonderful skeleton from Wyoming, this head was on it. It's a wonderful head, but it's the wrong head.
How did early dinosaur experts put the wrong head on the brontosaur? When big dinosaurs died, their remains were often torn apart by scavengers or scattered by floods. Add millions of years on a shifting Earth, and it's easy to see why heads and bodies often went their separate ways.
So it's very rare to find a head, and then a neck, and then a torso, and a tail. You usually find mixed up parts. The first Brontosaurus didn't have a head, but there was a big head from another quarry nearby. Take the body from quarry A, the head from quarry B, put them together. Made sense. They fit pretty good. It was dead wrong.
But as more fossils were discovered, scientists realized their mistake and replaced Brontosaurus heads in their museums. Bakker's hunting ground is Como Bluff in central Wyoming. He returns every summer to search for more dinosaur relics. He's joined by groups of graduate students hoping to make their mark in the field. They'll likely have little to show after a long day in the blistering heat. It's the possibilities that drive them on. The chance to discover a completely new dinosaur, or a complete skull or skeleton. If they're lucky, their finds will add to the continuing wealth of fossils that began in the early 1800s. As the evidence accumulates, new theories are formed, old ones discarded. From sluggish behemoths to fleet-footed upright racers. From cold-blooded to warm-blooded, dinosaurs continue to fascinate as our picture of them becomes clearer. While Bakker was redefining our ideas about the creatures, Jack Horner was in his lab, solving the most compelling dinosaur mystery of all. At Egg Mountain in Montana, Jack Horner's dinosaur eggs provided an opportunity to test whether dinosaurs were bird-like or reptilian. He took his treasure to the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman and devised an experiment. The answer to his question was written on the bones of the dinosaur hatchlings. If the leg bones were weak, the baby dinosaurs would need parental help, indicating bird-like behavior. But before measuring the strength of the bones, Horner needed to determine which of his specimens were embryos and which were just hatched. A computer enabled him to visualize the largest embryo that could fit inside the egg. Any that couldn't fit must have been hatchlings. Once he identified a hatchling leg bone, he cut a thin cross-section of it. From its microscopic structure, he could determine if it would have been strong enough to bear the creature's weight. He concluded these baby dinosaurs were too weak to stand on their own. They depended on their parents to care for them. Bird-like behavior, never heard of in dinosaurs before. He appropriately named the new dinosaur Maiasaur, the good mother lizard. With his new knowledge about Maiasaur behavior, Horner headed back to Egg Mountain. After years of digging, he concluded that 80 million years ago, the surrounding area was a giant dinosaur nursery. Adult Maiasaurs must have shuttled back and forth to feed their young. It would have been as crowded as the nesting colonies of many seabirds today.
We know they nested in colonies, and some of the nests that we have looks as though the nests were 25, about the length of an average adult apart from one another, which is similar to birds.
From his study of nearby sediments, Horner believes Egg Mountain was once an ancient island, surrounded by a shallow lake, which helped protect the babies from predators. Dinosaurs may have waded out to the island to lay eggs and tend to their young until they were strong enough to leave. Through the accumulation of fossils and the shrewd analysis of paleontologists such as Horner and Bakker, the uniqueness and diversity of the dinosaurs is becoming ever clearer. They were bird-like without being birds, reptilian without being reptiles. The question remains, When did these innovations begin? The answer may lie in the Valley of the Moon. Today, 65 million years after the last dinosaurs disappeared, their fossilized bones are being unearthed. Though the rocks are slow to give up their treasures, scientists have discovered over 330 members of the dinosaur clan. On average, a new type of dinosaur is named every 7 weeks. At the foot of the Andes Mountains in Argentina lies a rugged, barren landscape known as Ischigualasto. In English, the Valley of the Moon. 230 million years ago, this was a dense and shady forest. Stalking through it were small but menacing creatures, the first known dinosaurs. Buried here, along with their bones, is the secret of their dominance. Isolated in the desolate beauty of this barren Argentine landscape, a team of dinosaur hunters hopes to unlock the mysteries of dinosaur evolution. Ischigualasto, the Valley of the Moon, is one of the most productive fossil quarries in the world. Erosion caused by wind and rain, combined with a seasonally dry climate, have exposed layers of sediment dating back almost 300 million years. From a central camp, 80 miles from the nearest town, the team, led by American paleontologist William Sill of the University of San Juan in Argentina, makes daily expeditions to other parts of this 105,000-acre region. Sill has explored this valley for 25 years. It's one of the best places in the world to study the roots of dinosaur evolution and understand what made dinosaurs unique among the other creatures that shared the planet.
This valley is just about the only place in the world where you have a complete sequence of sediments that have fossils in them and that show the story of the origin of the dinosaurs. And that's very rare, very hard to find.
Descending through one of the valley's many canyons, Sill and his colleagues go back millions of years. Each layer of sediment that surrounds them was laid down at a different point in the Earth's history. To understand why the dinosaurs rose to dominance, they must go back to sediments some 230 million years old. It's the first of 3 geologic periods in which the dinosaurs lived, known as the Triassic. It lasted from 248 to 205 million years ago. The middle period is the Jurassic, from 205 to 144 million years ago. It was dominated by the largest known dinosaurs, the sauropods. The last period was the Cretaceous, beginning 144 million years ago. It gave rise to Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, and Velociraptor. Then, 65 million years ago, the Cretaceous ended, and the dinosaurs mysteriously vanished. Dinosaurs were already becoming the dominant species by the middle of the Triassic. To discover the world as it existed when they first appeared, Sill digs in sediments just before that time. The dominant creatures of this earlier period were reptiles that had begun to acquire some features of modern-day mammals. In the Valley of the Moon, one of the most common of these mammal-like reptiles was the cynodont.
This is the skull of a cynodont, one of the mammal-like reptiles, very common here, possibly an omnivore, probably a vegetarian. When you look at the skull, this is how we find them. And it doesn't look like much at first, but if you look closely, you can see the outline of the eyes here, the snout down here, and back here, the large temporal openings where the muscles that pull the jaw together came up through. And here's actually part of the lower jaw sticking up through this opening. Now these were on the line to mammals. They have some of the characteristics of mammals.
Mammal-like reptiles sprawled low to the ground like reptiles. With larger brains and complex teeth like mammals. They seemed to be well on their way to becoming the dominant animals that mammals are today. But then their future was jeopardized. To find out how, Sill takes his expedition higher up the eastern slope at Ishigolasto. The Red Cliffs hold sediments from the final years of the Triassic period. Here, mammal-like reptile fossils are almost non-existent. In their place are the bones of a new kind of creature, the dinosaur. What happened? Part of the answer comes from one of the earliest dinosaurs found here, Herrerasaurus, dating from 225 million years ago. It had all the tools necessary to trounce its rivals, the mammal-like reptiles. It was a 10-foot-long, 500-pound meat-eater. Most remarkable were its legs. Its unique knee and hip joints allowed it to move on 2 feet, a bipedal stance that gave it the agility and speed to surpass the low-slung, mammal-like reptiles. It also freed up its forelimbs.
He was bipedal, so his forelimbs were used for grasping, raking, tearing apart the prey.
In addition to its large claws, the skull and teeth of Herrerasaurus made it a formidable predator.
The things that make him a good dinosaur are these big teeth with serrated edges like a steak knife. And of course the major feature is this secondary jaw joint right here, a sliding jaw joint that allows the tooth-bearing part of the lower jaw to open independently of the rest of the lower jaw that opens from back here. This would have increased the gape of the animal by about 30 degrees and allowed him to manipulate prey up front while still holding tight to it with the rear of the jaw.
Puncture wounds on the skull of Herrerasaurus are battle scars, apparently from a fight with one of its own.
From the size of the tooth marks on his skull, here we can see 1 or 2 of them. Puncture wounds. There's another puncture wound down here. From the size of these, it looks like it was the same critter. They may have been fighting over a killed prey.
At the time it was discovered, Herrerasaurus was the most primitive dinosaur ever found. But since it had already developed features similar to later meat-eating dinosaurs, it couldn't have been the first. Instead, it was believed to have been a very early stage in the evolution of carnivorous dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex. The search continued for an even more primitive dinosaur. In October 1991, one of Sill's graduate students, Ricardo Martinez, found one. His team uncovered the bones of a dinosaur roughly 3 feet long, barely the size of a dog. It was found in sediments 228 million years old, practically the dawn of the dinosaur age. It was named Eoraptor, the Dawn Stealer. Since then, Sill's group has found 6 more.
This is a skull of Eoraptor, tremendously important in the history of dinosaurs, because the teeth of this shows that it is a carnivorous dinosaur. The high, narrow skull, the large orbits tell us that it was an active predator. And one of the great things that tells us of its possible ancestor of all the carnivorous dinosaurs is this incipient jaw joint the second joint that allows it to manipulate prey. And that's a major characteristic of all of the later carnivorous dinosaurs. But it also contains the primitive features in the palate. It still has the old primitive teeth. So here we have what I consider to be an ideal ancestor for the later carnivorous dinosaurs.
Living just before Herrerasaurus, Eoraptor had similar features, including a bipedal stance and serrated teeth. But its sliding jaw joint was much less developed. Even so, Sill believes it was a menacing predator that could overpower the mammal-like reptiles.
He was fast, he was agile, and he was probably very vicious. Judging from modern crocodiles and birds, even, you know, if you've seen a rooster, or if you can imagine an ostrich who is a vicious predator with big teeth and claws instead of wings, chasing down a pig or some other animal across the plains, that's probably as close as we can come to visualizing Eoraptor as a predator.
Eoraptor's features were similar to those of Herrerasaurus, but more primitive. Double-jointed jaws, serrated teeth, and an agile stance were too much for the slower, bigger-brained mammal-like reptiles to compete with. By the end of the Triassic period, dinosaurs had replaced them as the dominant animals.
The dinosaurs were faster, were more agile, and were tremendous predators. In this case, it's a question of being fast or being smart, and the smart guys lost.
Sill also discovered that the early meat-eaters had already developed hollow bones, a trait shared by modern birds. They were swift, light, bipedal killers. They cleared the path, allowing later dinosaurs to diversify, grow exponentially in size, and outcompete all other animals on land. This image of dinosaurs is far removed from the picture of them as oversized reptiles, first put forward at London's Crystal Palace Park in 1854. Science once pigeonholed dinosaurs as reptiles, but today we're seeing they shared features with birds and mammals too. They also had their own traits, unmatched by any living animals. Our growing knowledge of dinosaur behavior is now making it possible to bring these creatures back alive. Generations of dinosaur scientists have seen their discoveries transformed into public attractions that bring ancient worlds back to life. Today's version is a theme park being created by Walt Disney Imagineering. Engineers and artists are taking everything we currently know about dinosaurs and making them almost as real as they were 100 million years ago. According to science liaison Casey Brenna, the job still leaves room for interpretation.
One of the challenges of recreating an extinct species of which we only have bones to work with today is interpreting what their body motions, skin colors, and behavior will be. And we find that utilizing, of course, nature as it exists today, and with the new knowledge that probably birds are related to dinosaurs if they aren't actually dinosaurs, has given artists lots of inspiration in how dinosaurs would look, how they would act and behave.
Like their counterparts 150 years ago, dinosaur artists mixed scientific fact with fiction. But today, they have more science to work with. Scientists have found impressions of dinosaur skin, but no clues as to color. For a long time, artists picture them a dull gray. Since it's now believed that dinosaurs are related to birds, artists feel free to use more vibrant colors. Disney's robotic Styracosaurus, a relative of Triceratops, has also gained from the new paleontology. It was once perceived as a lumbering animal with a huge head stiffly mounted on its body and front legs splayed to the side like a lizard's. Recent studies show that its head was connected with the limber ball and socket joint. The animal's neck muscles could toss the head in any direction. Though we're getting closer to knowing how dinosaurs lived, moved, and acted, we're still a long way from knowing everything about them, but we're on the right track. 19th century scientists greatly expanded dinosaur science. More recently, men like Jack Horner and Robert Bacher have done the same. Inevitably, the discoveries and theories of today will be disputed in the future. But one of the new ideas is not likely to change, that far from being giant reptiles, dinosaurs were among the most complex, diverse, and successful creatures that ever existed. Millions of years ago, the forest thundered with the footsteps of giant dinosaurs. They were unstoppable and dangerous, at least to the plants. These were the herbivores. Today, dinosaur hunters are using new methods and sheer ingenuity to uncover the bizarre and clever ways plant-eating dinosaurs fended off attackers and devoured vegetation. Experts are revealing how some grew to be the largest animals that ever walked on Earth, and how others relied on magnificent and deadly armor as they struggled to protect themselves. As scientists probe deeper, they're finding out why these seemingly harmless plant eaters were the most plentiful and diverse of all the dinosaurs. Big or small, they ruled the land of the giants. Meet Nancy, the world's largest touring dinosaur. She arches 3 stories into the air, and soon she'll stretch longer than an 18-wheeler. Then she'll be center stage at DinoFest International, a traveling dinosaur exhibition. But first, a road crew must finish unpacking her 250 bones. More than half are real, discovered in Mongolia by a Chinese expedition. The rest are life-size casts. From her frame, scientists can infer much about how she lived, the adaptations and defenses that made her a success. Her great size was her best weapon and most useful attribute. 8-foot ribs once walled in a stomach so big that massive amounts of food might spend days inside, being converted to energy. Long legs as thick as tree trunks could carry her crushing weight for miles with minimal exertion. Her huge feet were twice the size of an elephant's. As they pounded the ground, they left a trail of craters revealing clues to the way she moved and where she went. Nancy's one of a group of the largest dinosaurs called sauropods. Their remains are found in Jurassic and early Cretaceous sediments, about 200 to 100 million years old. That's when they were the dominant plant-eating dinosaurs. Sauropods had a variety of features that fell between two extremes. On one hand was Diplodocus. It had a long tail, relatively short front legs, and slender pencil-like teeth. On the other was Brachiosaurus. Its front legs were taller, tail shorter, neck more upright, and it had broad spatula-like teeth. Nancy was more like a Diplodocus. Found in the Middle Cretaceous, she was the last of her kind. None were mental giants. Perched atop the long neck was a small skull, which encased a brain estimated at about 1/4 the size of a cow's. At the other end was a huge tail that could send attackers flying with a mere flick. What were these giant dinosaurs really like? How could an animal get so big? It's a puzzle that challenges scientists. While some rely on cutting-edge technology, others seek answers from surprisingly simple experiments. At Indiana-Purdue University, paleontologist Jim Farlow uses a method to estimate just how much sauropods weighed. He starts with a model of the dinosaur. Its precise proportions are based on fossil evidence and scaled down. He submerges it in a container of water and measures how much is displaced. That gives him the model's value. Next, knowing the model's scale, he can figure out the volume of the actual dinosaur and convert it to weight. Farlow's calculations show that a large sauropod might have weighed nearly 60 tons.
The really biggest sauropods, the ones that would have been at the upper end of the size range, you may be talking about animals that would have weighed 10, maybe even 20 times as much as a large elephant. And that's just something that your mind finds hard to comprehend.
As often happens in science, solving one puzzle leads to another.
So the obvious question is, why were they able to get so big when very few land mammals have been able to do the same thing? Well, truth in advertising here, I don't know, if you want the absolute truth, but I can offer some educated guesses.
Farlow and other scientists believe the sauropods era had become greener than the one before it. Evidence shows that carbon dioxide levels rose. Since plants use carbon dioxide as food, plant life flourished. With more food to eat, sauropods could grow to enormous sizes. But Farlow thinks these plants were low-grade and nutrient-poor. How then did sauropods grow and stay huge on such inferior food? To learn more about large plant-eating animals, Farlow is visiting Jed Friel's farm in Auburn, Indiana.
Jason's up there. You want to ride along?
Yeah, sure.
He'll get the gates for us.
Jed raises herds of today's most famous plant eaters, cows.
How much of that would one cow need in a day?
Well, you know, it takes about a half a bale a day per cow, is what we kind of figure in the wintertime. We like to see them have about 25 pounds of hay per cow to get them through the winter every day.
Digesting hay is a complicated matter. Once it's swallowed, it's softened in one of the cow's 4 stomachs. Microorganisms then break it down even more extracting vitamins. Then it's regurgitated and chewed again, known as chewing the cud. Sauropods also had help digesting. Some scientists believe they swallowed stones called gastroliths, like modern birds do. The gastroliths may have rolled around inside their stomachs or gizzards, grinding the vegetation into small digestible bits. Also, according to Farlow, it takes a long time for food to pass through a huge animal's enormous digestive tract, giving microorganisms more time to extract nutrients. So sauropods could digest even the poorest quality plant material.
I like to say the equivalent of shredded newspaper. And I suspect that sauropods could get by on that stuff. They were among the best herbivores that have ever lived, I suspect, in their ability to survive on really crummy food.
Sauropods were built to eat. They took full advantage of whatever plant life grew around them. But how much food did one of these giants eat? Well, if Jed was feeding sauropods instead of cows, he'd probably need a lot more land.
Jed was telling me that a 1,000-pound cow, if we were going to pasture it, about 10 acres, which is about the size of the field that we've got around us here. If we want to compare that with what a sauropod is doing, a 50-ton sauropod that's warm-blooded, you're probably looking at something like 270 acres, which is basically a little bit farther than as far as you can see from this hill we're on.
A single sauropod could consume almost 700 pounds of vegetation in a day. That's if it were warm-blooded. But not all scientists are convinced dinosaurs were warm-blooded. In fact, Farlow thinks warm-blooded sauropods would have devastated plant life so fast, nothing would have been left for them to survive on. So they must have been cold-blooded. Warm-blooded animals like cows need to keep their internal temperature high by eating lots of food. Cold-blooded animals like lizards rely on the sun for warmth and eat less. If cold-blooded, a sauropod would still need to eat almost 250 pounds of plants every day. Whether warm-blooded or cold, sauropods must have had voracious appetites. They amble through forests, devouring the scenery. With each thunderous step, they left a trail of clues hinting at their behavior. Tracks that are now being uncovered millions of years later by a new breed of dinosaur expert. Flying high in the sky, dinosaur expert Christian Mayer has spotted traces of huge dinosaurs in a Swiss mountain range known as the Jura, the place where the Jurassic period of the Age of Dinosaurs got its name. He's discovered dinosaur trackways here, covering an area 3 times the size of New York City. It's called a mega track site. Mayer knows that bones can tell a lot about anatomy, but only tracks can reveal clues about the movements of dinosaurs. Mayer also knows that it takes years of experience to interpret tracks. So he's asked track expert Martin Lockley from the University of Colorado at Denver to help. The first order of business for Lockley, Mayer, and assistant Dorothy Hippler is to map the track site using aerial photographs.
And the same with these over here, for example.
They examine the photos to establish the pattern and direction of each trackway, which holds clues to the dinosaur's behavior. But sometimes, irregularities in the rock can masquerade as dinosaur tracks.
Some of these look like tracks, but they're not. So for every good track, there's probably at least one bad one. So they're probably 4 or 5.
So far, Mayer has discovered nearly 15 separate trackways scattered throughout the mega track site. But how did they get here, in the heart of the Jura Mountains? The answer lies in a layer of rock that formed 150 million years ago in the Jurassic period. Back then, the geography here was very different. The continents were just beginning to move apart from the single landmass they had once formed, known as Pangaea. The Jura Mountains were a level shoreline of a now vanished ocean, the Tethys Sea. After dinosaurs trampled a soggy shoreline, sun and wind dried their tracks, which hardened like concrete. The next rainstorm or flood deposited a layer of sediment over the tracks, preserving them. Then, 15 million years ago, as the land masses continued to shift and collide, the shoreline was pushed upward, forming mountains. Sediment covering the tracks eventually eroded, revealing the fossilized prints. Today, Christian Mayer and his team of trackers are piecing them back together step by step.
Oh, like the slab is still dry, that's okay.
Among his most recent discoveries are trackways at a quarry near the town of Moutier.
Yeah, I wanted to set the rope up there where the casting people come. I think the oldest one. Andy, if you have the
After the aerial photographs, the team must examine the tracks up close. So they've pounded rappelling bolts into the rock to pull themselves up. Studying tracks made by animals millions of years ago is dangerous. To Martin Lockley, the risks are worth taking. He's after the thrill of the hunt.
It really is like being a tracker of modern animals. It's like following a creature that passed by yesterday sometimes. You feel that it's much more recent, you know, time doesn't mean anything. You're following a Jurassic animal one day, you're following a recent animal the next day.
Clinging to the rock, Martin and Dorothy give each massive footprint individual attention. To the trackers, the footprints are snapshots of living, breathing creatures.
And we're used to thinking of dinosaurs as skeletons, but these are the evidence of the living animal in motion. People have referred to them as motion pictures of dinosaurs, so they're a very dynamic type of evidence. We can see with the sauropod track, for instance, it had a big fleshy foot like an elephant. So the first thing we learn is the shape of the feet, not the shape of the bones in the foot skeleton that we see in the museum, but the actual shape of the feet.
The prints are scrutinized to identify the kind of dinosaur that made them. These impressions lack fine detail, but their round shape and large size, up to 3 feet across for the hindprints, show that they were made by the burly footpads of sauropod dinosaurs. Next, stride length is measured to figure out how fast the dinosaur was moving. The prints of a slow-moving animal are fairly close together. As it accelerates, its stride lengthens. The distance between the prints and average leg lengths known from skeletons are used to calculate speed. Mayer has determined that these massive creatures were sauntering at about 5 miles per hour, the average walking speed of an elephant. Track sites like these have also changed the way we think about sauropods. When their bones first appeared in the 19th century, scientists speculated that the creatures they belonged to lived in swamps. Water must have provided the buoyancy necessary to carry such enormous weight. And because it was thought that dinosaurs were related to reptiles, some believe they crawled low to the ground, dragging their tails like crocodiles or lizards. But trackways have told a different story. The lack of tail drag marks shows that the animals walked with their tails in the air. The narrow width between each footprint shows they walk with their legs directly beneath their bodies, like modern elephants, a stance that could support their tremendous weight without the help of water. Until now, mapping dinosaur tracks has been a low-tech operation. Today, Christian Mayer is testing a new method that uses lasers and computers. The device fires a beam of light to a small reflector placed in a footprint. By measuring how long it takes for the beam to return, the computer calculates the distance to the footprint.
It's very simple. I can do it like this. I can just put one point on this area, and he's calculating immediately the area, the surface, and surface will appear here.
I'm looking forward to the results. I
Okay,
think this will be a great thing.
The depth of each print is also recorded. From the data, the computer will generate a 3D contour map of the site.
Yes, I can measure whole step.
Because prints of the same depth were made at the same time, Mayer will be able to single out an individual trackway from multiple crossings with the click of a mouse. The new equipment promises to speed up the process of mapping trackways. But for now, the dinosaur trackers rely on slower, time-proven methods. After photographing and measuring the track site, a better picture of what the giant dinosaurs were doing at the ancient shoreline is emerging. The surface of the wall appears to be trampled over many times. It appears that hundreds of sauropods returned here time and again, perhaps to cool themselves. Or maybe lush vegetation along the banks provided a favorite feeding place. As dinosaur trackers follow in the footsteps of giants, active roaming dinosaurs seem to come to life. Elsewhere, a new discovery is fueling a long-simmering debate about how some of the smaller dinosaurs got around. These are the Badlands of North Dakota. 80 million years ago, this region of North America was crisscrossed by rivers and streams, a lush lowland leading to the edge of an inland sea. Throughout this land roamed the most exotic of plant-eating dinosaurs, Triceratops. They lived from about 100 to 65 million years ago, at the end of the final period of the dinosaurs, the Cretaceous. Like most other dinosaurs, they were smaller than the sauropods, but they were large animals in their own right. Some grew as big as a bus. Triceratops was a member of a family of dinosaurs called ceratopsians, creatures armed with a variety of sharp horns and large fan-like shields. But beneath all that remarkable armor is a heated debate that has simmered since these creatures were first discovered. How did they stand? It began in 1896, when the first known illustration of a ceratopsian skeleton appeared on a poster of specimens from Yale's Peabody Museum. The creature was shown with its front legs straight underneath, in an upright stance, like a rhinoceros. But it was a guess. Fossils from several discoveries were combined because a complete skeleton had not yet been found. In the same year, a Triceratops skeleton was mounted by the Smithsonian Museum. Also a composite, it was shown in a sprawling stance, front legs bent crocodile style. To many, an upright stance implies an agile, warm-blooded dinosaur that could charge attackers. A sprawling stance means an animal that's slower, more reptilian, and possibly cold-blooded. With no way to resolve the issue, ceratopsians have been depicted both ways for years. Now a remarkable discovery may end the dispute. In the summer of 1994, William Gartzka, a biologist from the University of Alabama, and paleontologist David Burnham found a fascinating triceratops in the Badlands of North Dakota. Gartzka had spent weeks scouring the land for dinosaur remains. Then one day, as he was coming over a hilltop, he noticed what looked like a rib bone sticking out of the ground. He contacted Burnham. They put together a crew and set up a dig site. As more and more bones were exposed, Gartzka and Burnham realized they had stumbled upon the most complete Triceratops skeleton ever found. Over millions of years, dinosaur skeletons tend to get broken up and the bones scattered over a wide area. But this skeleton was articulated. Most of the bones were still connected. They named their find Raymond. As Raymond emerged, Gartzka and Burnham could see for the first time the natural position of the front legs. They were straight underneath his body. Raymond and all his ceratopsian kin must have had an upright stance. Had the debate finally been settled? It looked that way, but Ralph Johnson of the Milwaukee Public Museum has some doubts.
Preservation is on these bones.
Before Raymond was found, he made a discovery of his own.
Attach the foot now, so that's got to be rotated around.
On an expedition in 1981, his team found a complete shoulder and front leg of a Torosaurus, another ceratopsian.
Okay. Hang on.
Back in the museum, he devised an ingenious way to test how the bones fit together. He made plastic casts of them, which he connected with metal joints. To simulate muscles, he used elastic straps, affixing them where the bones showed evidence of the actual muscle attachments. Then he hung the 7-foot model from scaffolding and tried walking the leg in both sprawling and upright positions. If the position worked, the bones would stay in their sockets. If not, the bones would slip out. The result surprised him.
In this kind of traditional reptile sprawl with the front leg, everything works. The joints all line up the way they should. The muscles act on the bones the way they should. It works. You can actually get this thing to walk forward, which is what you want it to do. Now, if we go into the other idea, straight underneath the body.
But when Johnson tried to walk the leg underneath the body, the bone could only move sideways, not back and forth.
There's a way to get around that, though.
When he twisted the bone around to make it move back and forth, he found another problem.
Well, now you've got the elbow going in the right direction toward the head of the animal. But now our dinosaur looks a little bit like Popeye with the foot pointing out to the side. So this thing is going to be walking like this. Actually, it won't be walking at all. There's no way biomechanically to get this animal to move forward by putting these legs directly underneath the body.
According to Johnson's experiment, the case was closed. Ceratopsians must have sprawled like crocodiles. But where does that leave Raymond, Gartzka and Burnham's prized discovery?
Raymond's forelimb and hind limb are clearly in an upright position. This is not what you'd expect from a lizard-like posture.
He's standing on his tippy toes, and so that enables him to move at greater speeds, kind of poised like a runner.
In Johnson's version, the shoulder blades are pulled back, enabling the legs to sprawl. But when Gartzka and Burnham uncovered Raymond, they found his shoulder blades much farther forward, allowing his legs to be pushed under the body, an upright stance. Johnson's impressed, but not ready to give in yet. Raymond's bones await further study. Once scientists have had a chance to thoroughly examine them, then the question may be settled. Johnson's already confident about the results.
And I'm glad about Raymond because it's a complete leg. It even has the bones in the hand. We know it's from one individual. And now what they can do is actually try to put those legs together, to put those bones together. And I'm pretty confident that they're going to find that once they try to articulate those bones, get the balls and sockets to line up, that they're not going to be able to get them underneath the body.
And you can see here
With a stance that hints at his behavior, Raymond clutches the secret to how his kind lived. Meanwhile, innovative use of medical technology is revealing how a dinosaur 80 million years older may have died. Stegosaurs were innocent-looking dinosaurs that feasted on Jurassic vegetation about 145 million years ago. But should the need arise, these generally docile creatures had the equipment to defend themselves against predatory dinosaurs. Plates along its back intimidated enemies by making the stegosaur appear larger than it really was, and lethal spikes at the end of a powerful tail could fend off the toughest opponents. But even though the spikes were as lethal as daggers, it seems they could also be a point of vulnerability. July 1992. At a remote location in Colorado, an unusual stegosaur skeleton was uncovered. Trapped at the bottom of a deep gully lay one of the most complete specimens ever found. With most of its bones still embedded in rock, it was prepared for transport out of the canyon.
It'd be better to leave.
Earlier in the excavation, paleontologist Ken Carpenter and his team discovered that the otherwise well-preserved skeleton had a deformed tail spike. It piqued their curiosity. But before they could study it, they'd have to get the stegosaur to the lab. As the final layer of rock was removed, the team faced a problem. The encased skeleton was too heavy to lift. Determined to get it out, they called in reinforcements. A U.S. Army helicopter was sent in to airlift the remains out of the ravine. They could then be taken to the Denver Natural History Museum, where Carpenter could give them a thorough examination. The helicopters are designed to raise 20th century battle tanks. Lifting the remains of a 145 million year old stegosaur wasn't much different. Back in the museum's lab, technicians painstakingly removed the bones from rock. Finally, Carpenter was ready to perform the autopsy. He began by focusing on the disfigured tail spike.
I didn't quite know what to make of it. I thought maybe it was due to crushing from the weight of the rock that was encasing it. I mean, certainly if we look at this more normal spike, we can see that there's quite a bit of difference in the shape.
As Carpenter studied the bony spike, he noticed that it showed signs of healing and regrowth, indicating that it wasn't damaged after death. He also detected small holes on the surface of the bone, suggesting disease. One possibility was a bacterial infection called osteomyelitis. If a bone has been broken and is left untreated, bacteria can invade its marrow, the blood-producing tissue held within a honeycombed structure at the center. Within days, fluid builds up, and the bone develops small holes to relieve the pressure. Eventually, the bone's inner structure is destroyed. The infection can spread throughout the body and cause death. Could this have been the fate of Carpenter's stegosaur? To find out, he would have to look inside the spike. But there was a problem. Doing this would require breaking open the rare fossil, something he wasn't willing to do. The answer lay inside Kaiser Hospital in Denver. Laurie McWhinney, one of his lab volunteers, worked there. She suggested using the hospital's CAT scan. Medical technology developed to harmlessly cut through human tissue and bone could expose the spike's interior without destroying it.
I want to see if we can see some detail in that area.
Okay.
First, they scanned a normal spike, the kind found on healthy stegosaurs. Next, the deformed spike. Then the scans were compared.
This represents a normal tail spike. You can see the dense outer bone represented here. The bone marrow is in the center. This is a pathologic spike, and you can see the dense outer bone, but the bone marrow is no longer where it should be.
In the infected spike, the honeycomb structure of the inner bone is gone, a clear indication that it was not crushed by rock, but destroyed by bacteria before the creature died. Now Carpenter can be quite certain the stegosaur suffered from osteomyelitis, possibly caused by a broken tail spike. But how did the dinosaur break its spike in the first place? It may have been a casualty of war. The weapons and armor of stegosaurs are clear to see. But dinosaur expert Bob Bacher has drawn some conclusions about the defenses of sauropod dinosaurs other than size that aren't quite so obvious. He claims to have uncovered the secret of how the sauropod he calls Brontosaurus protected itself.
I'm standing in the unprotected underbelly of Brontosaurus. Right here, there's no bone, there's no cartilage, and above me would be this huge vat of sloshing digestive fluids. We had thought that if you bit Brontosaurus here, you could kill it. We thought that if Brontosaurus sat down hard on a rock back here, could injure its abdomen, but we were wrong. We have just found the first perfect set of Brontosaurus belly armor, rods of bone, up to 3 feet long, which were embedded in the belly muscle, right up here. And these rods of bone have big knobs on them, proving there were strong ligaments in the belly muscle. This would give Brontosaurus the strongest abdomen of any animal that has ever lived. If you were a meat eater and tried to bite here, you'd break your tooth. If you're a meat eater and jabbed a claw in here, it would pull out. And if you're a Brontosaurus, these belly bones and muscles would keep your great sloshing gut stiff and firm if you wanted to move fast left or right, or if you wanted to stand straight up. You see, with a gut protected and stiffened like this, a Brontosaurus could go from all fours to straight up in a few seconds.
But a Brontosaurus was huge. So strong belly or not, lifting its body off the ground required a few fancy tricks with leverage.
Brontosaurus has a strange set of balancing organs. Now, the neck was hollow. All the bones were hollow. And here would be the lungs full of air. But you get back here, and it's all fluid-filled gut. And then, the mother of all rumps, these gigantic hip bones and thigh bones surrounded by muscle.
With its light front end and heavy rear, a Brontosaurus was like a seesaw, with the weight on one end. Tilting its front end up was no problem.
The animal's designed to go up, and go up quick. Why would you want to tilt up? Well, this is a plant eater. It lived in an environment where the summers were dry, nothing to eat at ground level. But there'd still be leaves, green leaves, on trees, tall trees. By tilting up quickly, you can access foliage that no other plant eater could get.
With its massive legs and long neck, Brontosaurus could reach perhaps 40 feet high. But that flexibility came with a price.
This is the front end of Brontosaurus, and there are two problems here. They're related. Number one, the body is designed to tilt up. That's true. How are you going to get blood from the heart way up to the head? Seems impossible. Problem number two, this animal has a tiny brain, a smaller brain than its ancestors. Brontosaurus evolution was dumbing down. Are the two problems related? Yeah. See, Brontosaurus would survive better if it could rear up and get those plants. The only way to get those plants would be to remove the need for blood to be pumped up to the head. How are you going to do that? eliminate the brain. In this case, reducing the brain was adaptive. Little brains don't need a constant flow of blood. This is a high-tech, successful 40,000-pound moron.
Perhaps, but not everyone agrees.
There's an alternative theory. It goes like this. Brontosaurus had a heart so big it could pump blood up at the velocity of a fire hose. It could get that blood way up to the head, even when the head was held really high. But what would happen when the Brontosaurus lowered its head? The rush of blood would blow the skull off the rest of the skeleton.
We may never know for sure how much heart a Brontosaurus had, but we do know that its kind were huge. And if size was its best defense, then perhaps the safest sauropod would be the most immense, an honor now bestowed on a dinosaur uncovered in the rugged badlands of Argentina. Below the equator, in a region of Argentina known as Patagonia, lies the small town of Plaza Juncal. Its tiny museum is home to the remains of what could possibly be the largest dinosaur that ever lived. With a patriotic touch, it's been named Argentinosaurus. For the past 8 years, paleontologist Rodolfo Correa and his team have been assembling the bones of this previously unknown sauropod from the Cretaceous period. But even with the creature still in bits, Correa believes the massive bones leave no doubt about its size.
The backbones of Argentinosaurus were at least 50% longer than any other vertebra from any other known sauropod around the world.
The bones of Argentinosaurus were first spotted on a remote ranch outside Plaza Juncal in 1988. Word got back to Jose Bonaparte, head paleontologist at the Argentine Museum of Natural History in Buenos Aires. He sent Correa, then a student, on a 1,000-mile journey to inspect the discovery. It didn't take long for Correa to appreciate the bone's importance. Determined to get this giant creature out of the ground, he moved his family to Plaza Juncal, then arranged a job at the little museum, assembled a crew, and started digging. After many months of hard labor, he and his crew freed enough bones to begin taking them back to the museum. Once there, the careful cleaning of the bones progressed, and Correa began to think about the enormous importance of his enormous dinosaur. Argentinosaurus, it seemed, had become the latest in the series of discoveries of the most gigantic dinosaurs. It started a century ago, when dinosaurs were first being unearthed in the American West. A rivalry emerged between two great paleontologists, Philadelphia's Edward Drinker Cope and Yale University's Othniel Charles Marsh. It quickly became one of the most vicious battles in modern science. Hostilities intensified in 1877, when a huge bone bed was discovered near Como Bluff, Wyoming. According to legend, teams sent out by Marsh and Cope lied and cheated, even destroyed fossils to prevent their rivals from collecting them. For 12 years, these destructive wars raged. In the end, Marsh's collectors had unearthed some of the biggest bones ever found. Among them was a nearly complete skeleton Marsh later called Brontosaurus. At an estimated 75 feet in length and 15 feet tall, it stood about as high as a one-story building and spanned the length of about 5 mid-sized cars. A new giant appeared in 1910, when the Berlin Museum mounted one of the biggest dinosaur excavations of all time in East Africa. 500 men labored to dig out 250 tons of dinosaur bones. Their greatest prize was Brachiosaurus. With a height of 40 feet and a length of 85 feet, it remains the biggest dinosaur ever assembled in a museum. It was taller than a 3-story building and as long as 6 cars. 70 years would pass before a bigger dinosaur was discovered. In 1979, in Colorado, a dinosaur was found that was so big, it was called Ultrasaurus. It stood 9 feet at its shoulders, possibly stretching more than 100 feet in length. It's likely to have towered 4 stories high and spanned as long as 7 cars. 6 years later, from a rocky outcrop in New Mexico, came the longest dinosaur ever found, the Earthshaker, Seismosaurus. It had a horizontal posture, but Seismosaurus still may have reached a height of a 3-story building. With its long whip-like tail, it's estimated to have spanned 150 feet, nearly the length of 9 cars. And what about Argentinosaurus? How does it compare? It could have been nearly 120 feet in length and 60 feet in height, 5 stories high and nearly 8 cars long. In overall size, Korea believes Argentinosaurus to be the biggest dinosaur ever found.
The bones of Argentinosaurus are representing an animal 100 tons in weight, which is equivalent to 20 African elephants all together at the same time and at the same body.
Today, Korea's team has uncovered all the bones they're likely to find. Now Korea faces a new challenge, finding a building large enough to house them. How long will Argentinosaurus hold its record? No one knows for sure, but a new challenger is already gearing up to take the field. Dinosaur hunting used to mean digging vast amounts of earth to find fossils. Geophysicist Alan Witten from the University of Oklahoma hopes to change that. He's merged firearms and computer technology with geophysical knowledge and come up with a method to locate dinosaur bones deep underground. Witten has come to help a colleague find the remains of a giant sauropod from the early Cretaceous, about 110 million years ago. It might be a future record breaker, but they need to find more of it to be sure.
And by the time we get out there,
here in southeastern Oklahoma, paleontologist Richard Cifelli and his team have already dug out 3 gigantic neck bones.
Our guess is that this bone here is about the 7th bone down in the neck, sort of towards the middle of the neck series. And it's a good deal larger than Brachiosaurus. I mean, this is a lot bigger than Brachiosaurus, which is a huge, huge animal. So this could rival the very biggest of described dinosaurs. So how y'all making out down here?
But just when Cifelli thought he might be on his way to discovering the biggest dinosaur ever, his luck ran out.
We found this neck, and then it just abruptly came to an end. And so we're missing the vast majority of this huge, huge animal. Where is it? You can't just dig forever. It's just not practical.
It was time to call in Alan Witten and his gear. First, the overlying soil must be scraped away and the ground flattened. Then Witten can start looking for more bones. He uses a huge 8-gauge shotgun mounted on wheels. When fired, it sends sound waves into the earth. The vibrations are detected by an assortment of buried microphones. Sound waves travel more quickly through the dense bone than the sandy soil, so they arrive at the microphones first. A computer analyzes the patterns of waves, then reveals the location of the underground objects. With his device, Witten might just be able to tell Cifelli where to dig next.
What I'm planning is to run the gun down the tape measure in this direction, shooting it every 2 feet, and what we'll get is a vertical slice, an image of a vertical slice right below this tape measure. Is that all right?
With the array of microphones in place and signaling to the computer, Whitten begins. His assistant stays with the computer to confirm transmission.
Now, what do we have?
Even with help from technology, it's hard locating dinosaur bones deep underground. But Whitten won't give up so easily. He's brought along other devices. One of the most promising is ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. It's been used for years in archaeology, but now it's being adapted to paleontology. Instead of sound waves, GPR beams radio waves into the Earth. Radio waves respond to the chemical composition of an object instead of density, and the results are easier to read. If the waves hit an object underground with the chemical composition of bone, they'll bounce back to the surface, showing up as an isolated blip on the computer screen. Despite technological advances, sometimes bones are still found by sheer luck. Cifelli found a few more while bulldozing the site.
We just stopped just in the nick of time with a bulldozer. That came down to like about this level, right where we had those bags. Gone another 3 or 4 inches, this would have been hamburger.
If Whitten's work proves successful, it will prevent close calls like this and revolutionize dinosaur hunting. But the use of geophysics in dinosaur exploration is in its early stages, and this time the giant's bones have proven elusive, so the challenge will have to wait. With further refinements, Whitten is confident that his technology will be a wave of the future that will help us see deep into the past. The subtle designs of plant-eating dinosaurs don't yield clues easily. But today's technology has aided in piecing together the adaptations and behaviors that allow them to flourish in a world of vicious predators. In the end, it's the energy and imagination of men and women that have helped us to better understand these unique dinosaurs and recreated a world that was lost millions of years before the first human walked the earth. Today, the bones of perhaps only 1% of all the dinosaur species that live have been uncovered. Imagine what's still waiting to be found. What has teeth like steak knives, claws of steel, and is 6 tons of pure terror? T-Rex, the ultimate killing dinosaur. This team of diggers has found more T-Rexes than any other. As they probe inside its skull, they find what's on its mind. Dinosaur hunters in Argentina have discovered a killer that's even bigger than T-Rex. But was it as ferocious? A bone bed in Wyoming reveals a tender side to the grizzly allosaurs. They may have had family values. A dinosaur digging family has unearthed the baby they call Bambi. But watch out, this baby bites. It's a raptor. The awful allosaurs, the nastiest raptors, the most cunning carnivores. Meet the dinosaurs' killer elite. In the desolate badlands of South Dakota, a team of diggers searches for something nearly as precious as diamonds. The bones of Tyrannosaurus rex. Everyone's heard of T-Rex, but almost nobody has found one. Despite a century of searching, no more than 24 specimens have ever turned up. But this team has found more T-Rexes than anyone else. They're from the Black Hills Institute, a private fossil hunting operation headquartered in Hill City, South Dakota. Since 1990, they've uncovered 5 T-Rexes, including 2 of the most complete and largest skeletons anyone has ever seen. Three years ago, they found the first fragments of a T-Rex they nicknamed Duffy. This year, they're back to recover the rest of this once mighty meat-eater. Tyrannosaurs were armed with slashing claws and jaws bristling with 6-inch serrated teeth. They belonged to a group of meat-eating dinosaurs called theropods, meaning beast foot. Common features were a 2-legged stance and 3 main toes on their hind feet. Some were as small as chickens, but an adult T-Rex weighed in at 6 tons, a bit more than a modern bull elephant. They lived near the end of the dinosaur era, the late Cretaceous, from 80 to 65 million years ago. On T-Rex's trail is a team led by dinosaur hunter and Black Hills president Neil Larson, now a veteran of 5 T-Rex digs. Finding Duffy's bones is proving difficult. After 3 seasons, only 25% of the skeleton has been unearthed. Many of the large leg and backbones are still missing. So is much of the head. This year, Larson hopes their luck will change.
Well, there's a number of skull bones that we have not yet found for Duffy. We don't know if we found the brain case or the very front part of the nose of the Tyrannosaurus rex. Those would be extremely important to find because it would finish giving Duffy a face.
Dinosaur skeletons are rarely found with the bones lying in their proper places, next to each other. More often, scavengers would drag off pieces of the decomposing dinosaur, scattering them over the landscape. That's what dinosaur hunter Terry Wentz suspects happened here.
Duffy was scavenged upon and scattered through a large area with a kind of a pocket of bones down here by where these folks are working. And then we found scattered skull bones way off in the distance. Now what we'd like to find is maybe where the animal actually died, because most of those bones are the lighter bones. We'd like to find the heavy pelvic bones and the leg bones.
With no way of telling where the rest of Duffy lies, or even if it still exists, Wentz's crew starts by scraping away layers of topsoil. They watch carefully for any sign of fossils. A trained eye can tell fossils apart from rock by their distinctive color and texture. If the crew spots one, they'll start digging by hand. It's demanding work. Soon the team uncovers an exciting fossil, but not a dinosaur. They found the remains of a giant sequoia tree. It testifies to how drastically the parched badlands have changed since T-Rex's day, when they were covered by a lush forest. Deep in this forest, 68 million years ago, a tyrannosaur died. Scavengers moved in, ripping away its rotting flesh and scattering its bones. Eventually, the earth covered them up, locking them underground for millions of years. Today, rain, snow, and wind have eroded the ground, and the bones lie just beneath the surface, waiting for the Black Hills crew to uncover them again. Eventually, the team spots a tooth, and then they discover the very fragment they were hoping to find, the bone from Duffy's front jaw.
This is an important bone because this is the part that held the first four teeth of the face of Tyrannosaurus rex. It also held the opening for the nostril of the Tyrannosaurus rex. But another reason it's so important is because this bone holds the first 4 teeth of the T-Rex that would bite into its prey. This is the front of a skull tooth. What's really neat about this tooth is that the tooth broke off in life, and then it kept using it even after it chipped it and even polished the face of it. It probably broke its tooth fighting another Tyrannosaurus rex or biting into the bone of another dinosaur.
Digging up Duffy's bones is just the first step. Now they must be taken back to the Black Hills lab, where they'll be cleaned and studied. Everyone in Hill City, South Dakota knows how to find Black Hills Institute. Locate the sign with a burger-eating dinosaur and look across the street. You'll see a Tyrannosaur skull guarding the entrance. Most of the time, Hill City is a quiet town, but in 1992, it became the center of one of the hottest dinosaur disputes of all time. On May 14th, a dozen FBI agents, the National Guard, and local police carried out a surprise raid. They'd come to seize Black Hills' most valuable discovery, the largest and most complete T-Rex ever found, nicknamed Sue. The government claimed that Pete Larson, Neil's brother, dug up Sue in 1990 from public land without permission. They confiscated the bones and locked them up at the South Dakota School of Mines. Larson denied the charge. Hill City residents were up in arms about the government's actions and protested. It didn't help. Pete Larson went to trial. He was acquitted on the charges related to Sue, but was handed a brief sentence for failing to fill out customs forms concerning imported money. In 1997, Sue was turned over to Sotheby's for auction.
And I begin with a bid of $500,000, Deputy.
Black Hills tried to buy her back, but was outbid. They couldn't match the record $7.6 million she was sold for.
Fair warning then, it's $7,600,000. Up here. $7,600,000.
Though there's been nothing quite like the battle over Sue, the hunt for T-Rex has often stirred up controversy and attracted colorful characters. Men like Barnum Brown, who found the very first T-Rex almost a century ago. He would turn up in the dusty Badlands sporting an elegant raccoon coat and polished boots. They said he could smell fossils. In 1902, Brown spotted a small bit of bone on a Montana hillside. The rock was so tough he had to blast it with dynamite. But what he revealed was astonishing: the remains of a gigantic carnivorous dinosaur. At the American Museum of Natural History, where Brown worked, they unpacked the stupendous fossils and dubbed the new find Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. Eventually, Brown found another specimen, while the museum assembled the first ever skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus. The legend of the killer T-Rex was born. Fossils are still shipped in from the field exactly as they were in Brown's day, encased in a protective coat of burlap and plaster. Beneath that coat, the fossils still lie embedded in fragments of rock. Freeing them is where the hard work of the Black Hills lab begins. It's a painstaking job. Careless preparation could destroy subtle surface details of the bones, such as marks of disease or injury. So the Institute has developed a new technique for eliminating the final layer of rock without damaging the bone. It's like a gentle form of sandblasting, but instead of sand, they use baking soda. The soda particles are softer than the fossil bone and won't damage it. But even with modern techniques, it can take a team of 20 people a year to clean a single large dinosaur. Of the hundreds of bones in a complete tyrannosaur, none are more intriguing than the skull. The team will spend hours poring over every nook and cranny, trying to get inside T-Rex's head and see what really made it the ultimate killing machine. It's 68 million years ago, and T-Rex is on the move. It's picked up the scent of its prey. But is it a mindless marauder or a cunning killer? Though we can't put ourselves inside the mind of T-Rex, we can get inside its fossilized skull. Neil Larson of the Black Hills Institute has studied the brain case and the subtle clues it reveals about T-Rex intelligence.
This is the inside of the brain case of a Tyrannosaurus rex. By studying the different nerve endings and looking at the outside of the skull, we can see and figure out how large the brain case of the Tyrannosaurus rex is. This is a cast of a brain from a juvenile Tyrannosaurus rex. An adult T-Rex would have a brain about twice this size. Even though the Tyrannosaurus rex had a large-sized brain, it was not as large as a human's. The purpose of the brain was to serve for reflexes, so it could hunt, so it could fight, so it could sleep and figure out if it was hungry, and for mating. But it did not have the mental capacity that it needed if it was to look at the stars and wonder what was going to happen next. It didn't have to appreciate good music. All it had to do was survive in a world of dinosaurs.
While T-Rex was no intellectual, its brain was larger than any of today's reptiles, and it was bigger than almost all other dinosaurs, like the plant eaters it tracked down. But just how well that brain could perceive the world around it is a matter of debate. Neil Larson thinks T-Rex had vision that allowed it to home in on its prey.
Tyrannosaurus rex had large eyes and binocular vision, eyes that face forward. Unlike plant eaters whose eyes were off to the side, Tyrannosaurus rex eyes looked straight ahead at what it was after, just like that of eagles and like that of the world's greatest predators, humans. It could follow its prey, and it also had depth perception, so it knew exactly what distance the prey was.
Other scientists aren't so sure T-Rex could see in 3D. While its eyes did face forward, its deep snout may have limited the overlap in vision needed for 3D. But one thing no one argues about is the effectiveness of its teeth, 60 of them in an average skull, and longer and stronger than those of any other dinosaur.
Well, we've always heard that the teeth of Tyrannosaurus rex were knife-like or dagger-like and strongly serrated. Well, yes, they are serrated, and the serrations are used for cutting through the meat. They're round in cross-section, they're round in shape, so that as the tooth goes through the meat and meets the bone, it can punch right into the bone, thereby crushing it instead of, if it was flat, breaking off.
With its large brain and bone-crushing teeth, T-Rex was long thought to be the most fearsome killer that ever lived. But a new discovery may topple T-Rex from his throne. In 1993, in the Badlands of Argentina called Patagonia, a chance discovery turned up the remains of a predatory dinosaur that may be even bigger than T-Rex. It was found by car mechanic and fossil hunter Ruben Carolini. He lives near the little frontier town of Plaza Juncal, 700 miles southwest of Buenos Aires. While fossil hunting in his homemade dune buggy one day, he stumbled across a huge bone. At first, he thought it belonged to a giant plant-eating dinosaur and contacted paleontologist Rodolfo Correa at Plaza Juncal's local museum. Correa and a colleague inspected the bone and quickly realized it didn't belong to a plant eater, but to a giant carnivore. They named the great beast Giganotosaurus carolini in honor of its discoverer. This 2-foot bone comes from the creature's massive lower jaw. The complete skull is 6 feet long, the longest of any dinosaur ever found, and a foot longer than T-Rex's. In March 1996, less than 2/3 of the creature had been recovered. Parts of the jaw and tail, as well as the front arms and claws, were still buried, leaving many questions unresolved. So Correa and his crew of 5 set out on the final lap of their momentous search for the biggest meat eater of all.
Yeah.
Never passing up a chance to find more of his discovery, Carolini joins the expedition. Once they arrive at the site and set up their tents, the digging can start. Helping the team is visiting American dinosaur hunter Nate Murphy. On the first day, Correa's luck is in. The crew finds part of the skull called the premaxilla, a bone that holds Giganotosaurus's front teeth and forms its snout. It's an important find. Now Correa can piece together the dinosaur's face.
It's bigger than I thought. It's kind of a Jimmy Durante of theropods.
Right.
Big.
Right.
Big nose.
It's the last missing piece from Giganotosaurus's 6-foot-long skull, and a face they won't forget in a hurry.
It definitely wouldn't have won any beauty contests. Would have made T-Rex look like a prom queen. The nasal bone would be this, in essence, to us. So we've got this big, ugly nasal processes running right down to the opening of the nose. You know, just gnarly, bumpy stuff. And then these huge teeth hanging out. I'll tell you, it'd be your worst nightmare. This thing is ugly.
After today, Correa unearthed what remained of Giganotosaurus, giving him important new insights into this previously unknown killer. Giganotosaurus was at least 3 tons heavier and 3 feet longer than the biggest tyrannosaur. Though at a glance it looks like T-Rex, there are enough differences to suggest they weren't closely related. Giganotosaurus had a smaller, narrower brain. Its razor-sharp teeth were adapted for slashing flesh, not crushing bone. With its thicker bones and massive tail, it may have been a more powerful fighter. But the two would never have battled face to face. Though both come from the Cretaceous period, 144 to 65 million years ago, Giganotosaurus lived in the early part, 30 million years before T-Rex's time. Giganotosaurus has emerged as a truly remarkable beast, a grotesque killer even larger than T-Rex. But perhaps Korea shouldn't be surprised by his creature's uniqueness. Dinosaurs, unlike any others, keep turning up in Argentina. The Argentine Museum of Natural History in Buenos Aires is a treasure house of strange and unique species from ancient Patagonia. For the past 30 years, it has been the home base of Argentina's most celebrated paleontologist, Jose Bonaparte. In 1985, he excavated the remains of a large meat-eating dinosaur. At about 25 feet in length, it was half the size of Giganotosaurus and not as old. It lived in the Middle Cretaceous period, about 100 million years ago. But as Bonaparte quickly realized, it was more bizarre than other carnivorous dinosaurs.
El dinosaurio más raro, más extraño que hemos encontrado.
This is the strangest dinosaur we have.
Que fue encontrado hace 10 años.
It was found 10 years ago in northern Patagonia.
Y que tiene.
The oddity about this dinosaur are these two front horns, along with these very carnivorous teeth.
A la presencia de dientes muy carnívoros.
This dinosaur also had a shorter snout than other meat-eating dinosaurs. It reminded Bonaparte of a bull, so he named the creature Carnotaurus, or carnivorous bull lizard. No other meat-eater has horns like Carnotaurus. Bonaparte thinks they weren't hunting weapons, but evolved for sexual display, like the antlers of stags. Perhaps male Carnotaurs locked horns when they competed for females. Carnotaurus represents a bizarre offshoot of the meat-eater's family tree. But in Argentina, it's not just exotic branches that are found. The possible roots of the family tree have been discovered here, ancestors that would eventually give rise to the most famous killer of all time, T-Rex. Dinosaur hunters have long hoped to find traces of the earliest dinosaur. A creature that would be the common ancestor of all the later dinosaur groups, including the giant meat-eating theropods like T-Rex. To hunt for dinosaur origins, they come to Ishigualasto, the Valley of the Moon. The valley is a gigantic depression in the foothills of the Andes in Argentina. Here, the ancient land surfaces are stacked one on top of another, like pages in a book. Fierce winds batter the parched cliffsides and mesa tops, slowly eating away the old land surfaces, exposing each page of the book and the fossils buried millions of years ago. These rocks date from the Triassic period, from 245 to 210 million years ago. This was the age when the first dinosaurs appeared. In the Valley of the Moon, Argentine scientists uncovered fossils of one such early dinosaur, which they named Herrerasaurus. The creature was around 10 feet long and must have weighed about 500 pounds. Though primitive, it possessed many features seen in the major theropod dinosaurs that followed. Paleontologist Bill Sill of San Juan University has been studying Herrerasaurus for 25 years.
Herrerasaurus
a primitive carnivorous dinosaur. You have the high, narrow skull, big eyes, and notice that all of the strength of the muscles of the jaw were straight over the teeth, which meant that all of the muscle power went directly to the teeth. And on top of that, he had a free forelimb. He was bipedal, so his forelimbs were used for grasping, raking, tearing apart the prey. Look at the size of those claws.
Before the time of Herrerasaurus, most large land animals were low-slung creatures that resembled crocodiles. Herrerasaurus looked entirely different. Changes in the structure of its ankles and hips allowed it to walk upright, a bipedal body plan that was to reappear in all later meat-eating dinosaurs.
The femur, that's the leg bone. Now look at that, the knee joint and the hip joint allowed him to stand completely vertical, which means he was not only bipedal, but all of his legs were rotated under the body. That means speed and agility. So this fellow would have been like a two-legged tiger going across the plains hunting prey.
With Herrerasaurus, the earliest forms of the killer dinosaurs' deadly weapons had appeared. Over millions of years, its descendants evolved their own unique killing strategies. In northwestern Montana, they found the remains of one such descendant. And while they're uncertain of the exact identity, it looks like it could be Velociraptor, a small but chillingly efficient killer. The discovery's been made by an unusual dinosaur hunting team, a family named the Linsters. Each summer, the Linsters pack up their camper and drive out to a ranch for a unique kind of vacation. Who needs the beach when you have your very own dinosaur quarry? Cliff Linster and his family have no formal training in paleontology, but they become skilled at identifying fossils and are meticulous in their field methods. Cliff has taught the boys how to dig fossils like professionals. After the topsoil is removed, they uncover bones with ice picks and brushes, while applying acetone hardener to fortify them against breakage. The work is difficult, but there's quite a kick in uncovering dinosaur bones that haven't seen the light of day in 80 million years. And occasionally, like most families, they can't resist a chance to joke around. Like the time Wesley found the skeleton of a ground squirrel. After carefully painting it black, he told Dad it was a dinosaur bone.
One day, our second boy came to me with this little bone here. We looked it over, we couldn't identify it, and from there we went to the Black Hills Institute, and the first guy we showed it to there got a big smile on his face and dug out his book and said, "Oh, this is a squirrel bone." It is. It's a ground squirrel, common gopher, painted with magic marker, super glued. Good job of faking.
But practical jokes can backfire. A few days later, Wesley uncovered the real bones of a small dinosaur.
We came up to move some overburden, and I got down a little too deep, and I rolled out a dirt clod, and it had the small jaw in there that I could tell was carnivore after I looked at it for a while. So after I found that, I ran down the hill and found my mom.
When he first told his mother, she didn't believe him. She thought he was just playing another joke. But soon it was clear that Wesley had found the remains of Velociraptor, or a very close relative. Even more exciting, the bones were tiny. This was a baby dinosaur. It was no more than 3 feet long and 18 inches tall, about the size of an eagle. Because the bones were so immature, it was hard to be sure of the exact species. The Linsters named it Bambi. When the family showed the bones to paleontologist David Burnham, he instantly recognized the importance of their discovery.
pound for pound, this little guy was dynamite. And these bones are so important because the fossil record for small theropods is very rare because the bones are lightly built and therefore don't usually preserve very well.
Bambi and its parents are part of a group of dinosaurs from the early Cretaceous, commonly called raptors. Lightly built, they probably leaped feet first at prey, using their stiff tails for balance and their retractable toe claw to rip open flesh with a single stroke. Though little is known about their behavior, one site revealed 5 skeletons buried together, hinting at a frightening idea. These quick and deadly dinosaurs may have run and hunted in packs. With Bambi, we may learn even more about raptors. The Leinsters managed to find 90% of the skeleton, making it quite possibly the most complete of its kind ever found. The Leinster family's discovery is raising other questions. Appropriately, they concern dinosaur family life. How was delicate young Bambi cared for and protected? Who caught its food? A provocative answer is emerging from a collection of scarred bones found by a Sherlock Holmes of dinosaur sleuthing. This is Como Bluff in Wyoming, a fossil gold mine ever since railroad workers found the first bones here in 1877. Today, it's the favorite hunting ground of Bob Bacher and his wife Constance. Bob is the wild man of dinosaur experts, an original thinker whose provocative theories continue to shake up the field. Now he's reconstructing the family life of carnivorous dinosaurs. The work began when Bob opened a new site just below the ridge at Como Bluff. It turned out to contain a curious mixture of bones from different kinds of large dinosaurs.
This is nail quarry, named for an antique nail found on the surface. Most of the time I have to say some amateur student found an important site, but this is one of the few places I can say, I found this. When we started digging in, there were fun things. There were giant carnivorous dinosaurs, meat eaters, some as big as T-Rex, but 60 million years earlier. Well, that's kind of interesting.
For most of that time, in the Jurassic period, the landscape here was a floodplain without any major rivers or streams. Not the kind of environment where dinosaurs would gather, or where their bones would usually survive. Something else must have brought them to Como Bluff. But what? As Bacher dug into the quarry, the mystery deepened. He found the bones of more and more different kinds of dinosaurs, both plant eaters and meat eaters.
There are 4 species of giant carnivorous dinosaurs here. That's interesting. There's a rich fauna of meat eaters. But they were victims. As we dug the bones of these giant carnivores, we found they'd been chewed. These weren't eaters, they were eatees. And they were chewed, they were gnawed.
Tooth marks were clearly visible on the bones, so it looked like Nail Quarry had been a feeding site. Dinosaur victims had been killed elsewhere, dragged back, and eaten here.
Another weird thing about this quarry is there are no small animals at all. The smallest animal is a baby Diplodocus at 5 tons, 10,000 pounds. That's the smallest animal. Well, whoever dragged the carcasses here didn't want small bodies. They didn't want little prey. They wanted big hunks of meat and bone and gristle. They wanted the haunch of a brontosaur, the shoulders of a stegosaur, the tail of a megalosaur, big pieces.
So who was doing the killing, dragging, and eating? Besides the chewing marks, there were other clues scattered among the bones.
Meat-eating dinosaurs leave calling cards when they chew. They had teeth like crocodiles or sharks. They'd break off a tooth, a new tooth would grow in. They'd break off their teeth where they were chewing their prey, their carcasses. This is a carnivore tooth. It's got wear at the tip where the enamel was ground off. It was chewing bones.
Scattered among the assortment of bones at Nail Quarry, Bacher found teeth that belonged to just one type of dinosaur.
And there's only one species of predator, just one particular species of allosaur, no one else.
So that was an allosaur lair.
Weighing almost 2 tons and stretching over 30 feet, allosaurs were among the Jurassic's most formidable hunters. If Bob is right, they killed their victims first, then dragged them back to Nail Quarry. But why? Among the teeth Bakker found were tiny ones like this, from the smallest allosaur ever found. A baby that probably weighed just 1 pound, fresh out of the egg. According to Bakker, that's why allosaurs drag their prey here, to feed their helpless infants.
Here is the shoulder blade of a brontosaur. And cutting across it are tooth marks left by carnivores who were gnawing away the flesh. Those are pretty deep. That's from a medium-sized allosaur, maybe 1,000 pounds. But here are wee little ones. Those are so small, they only match those tiny baby hatchling allosaurs. So the scene is there's mother and half-grown allosaurs chewing, and over at this corner, the little baby.
Before Bakker's discovery, nest sites of only plant-eating dinosaurs had been found, together with evidence of parental care. But many paleontologists assumed that carnivorous dinosaurs were solitary killers who didn't look after their young. Now, bones from Nail Quarry are changing that view. Even the fiercest dinosaurs, it seems, became caring parents when they got back home.
If you're a baby lion, you're not fed rabbits. You're not fed chipmunks. You're fed hunks of zebra. You're a baby lion. Mother brings you a piece of zebra, big piece. But if you were a baby allosaur right here in this part of Wyoming, you wouldn't be fed a little chipmunk-sized dinosaur, and you didn't have to hunt for yourself. You just had to wait for mom, maybe your aunt, maybe dad, to drag in the latest 2-ton hunk of meat, and then you could sit right here and gnaw to your little baby allosaur's heart's content.
In his reconstruction of the allosaur feeding site, Bakker's passion for understanding how dinosaurs behaved is evident. All paleontologists ultimately strive in their own way for a similar goal: to reconstruct the lost world of dinosaur behavior. With 5 T-Rexes under their belt, the team at Black Hills Institute are in a unique position to test ideas about how carnivorous dinosaurs lived and died. This is Stan, a T-Rex discovered in South Dakota in 1992, the second most complete skeleton ever found. Stan is a world traveler, newly returned from a tour of Japan. While he's on the road, Stan looks more like a giant erector set than a dinosaur. That's because he's designed to be taken apart and fit into a collection of wooden crates, then slotted back together when he reaches his destination. Each bone is the original fossil. Black Hills has used all of its knowledge of T-Rexes to restore and mount Stan. Anatomically, he's probably the most up-to-date version of a T-Rex in the world today. Early reconstructions depicted tyrannosaurs as portly creatures, barely able to support their own weight and dragging their tails on the ground. But assembling recent specimens like Stan has revealed how wrong those early views were. The mistakes go back to the days of Barnum Brown, who found the first T-Rexes in Montana almost a century ago. When he brought them back to the American Museum in New York, no one knew for sure how the bones should be mounted. The director, Henry Fairfield Osborne, did the best he could with the little information then available. After considering several alternatives, he finally posed the first tyrannosaur upright with its tail and feet planted on the ground. This is the T-Rex that stood in the American Museum until 1990, scaring generations of children and inspiring Hollywood producers.
The land unknown. Could man have survived in the dinosaur age of mighty monsters? Shudder at history's most ferocious killer, Tyrannosaurus Rex.
But according to Black Hills Institute's Neil Larson, the museum got it all wrong.
80 years ago, when scientists mounted the first Tyrannosaurus Rex, they mounted it like this toy, and like they did all toys ever since then. They mounted it standing on two legs, resting on its tail for a balance. They couldn't figure out how T-Rex, being a bipedal animal, could stand on the two legs without falling flat on his face.
But the more complete Tyrannosaur skeletons unearthed in the 1990s are helping dinosaur experts rethink T-Rex anatomy. It seems they had no problem balancing on their back legs and didn't drag their tails. A V-shaped bone straddled the vertebra and limited the tail's up and down motion. Locked high off the ground, it counterbalanced the creature's massive head.
And with that counterbalance, he did not fall flat on his face. He could stand, he could walk, he could run at breakneck speed, chasing down his prey with that tail stretched out right behind him.
And so was born a new T-Rex, the sprinting killer, with a top speed of 40 miles per hour, according to Larson. But could this be just another T-Rex myth? Could T-Rex really sprint up to 40 miles per hour, as its revised posture suggests? To find out, you might come to Montana and look up Matt Smith, a renowned dinosaur sculptor. Smith became curious about T-Rex's mobility when the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman asked him to design and build a new T-Rex. In 1990, the museum had unearthed the most complete skeleton known at that time and wanted to show visitors what it would have looked like in the flesh.
In sculpting this rendition of the T-Rex, I was very fortunate. We were able to lay out all the bones, take a look at the relationship between the ribs, the vertebrae, everything.
To ensure his model was accurate, Smith had to measure each part of the creature, every bone, tooth, and claw. Then he had to decide how much flesh to put on the bones. It wasn't just guesswork. Although the Tyrannosaur's muscles are long gone, each has left its mark on the bones. The larger the muscle, the bigger the scar.
You need to look at the bones. And on the surface of the fossil, there's a correlation between the force the muscle exerts onto the surface of the bone and the scarring it leaves behind. By looking at that, you can help identify the placement of the muscle, the size, and it'll help give you a more accurate rendition of the animal.
With the model fleshed out and complete, Smith sent out copies for other dinosaur researchers to study. One reached paleontologist Jim Farlow of Indiana Purdue University, who wanted to use the model to investigate T-Rex's top running speed. According to Farlow, the creature's speed would be limited by its weight, so he used the model in a water displacement experiment to estimate how much the T-Rex weighed when it was alive. His calculations showed that it would have weighed 6 to 8 tons. If a T-Rex that heavy ran faster than around 20 miles per hour, Farlow believes the consequences would be fatal.
You've got an animal, a really big, heavy animal, the size of a small truck, going at this kind of speed in these certain scenarios. It can't stop itself.
What if T-Rex stumbled or tripped while sprinting at high speed?
the head alone coming down from 15 feet up in the air, that would be like taking a really big watermelon and dropping it from a second or third story window. I mean, the impact, the deceleration would sort of make it blow up like a water balloon.
Next, its body would be crushed under its own weight as it crashed to the ground.
Internal bleeding, broken bones, punctured lungs. You know, I just don't think it likely that the animal would have engaged in that kind of activity, even if the leg bones had been capable of supporting it. The risk strikes me as just too great.
Not everyone accepts Farlow's view, but a T-Rex running at even 20 miles an hour would be terrifying enough. Though tripping may have been disastrous for T-Rex, it wasn't the only danger large carnivorous dinosaurs faced. As scientists scrutinize the bones of meat-eaters, the truly violent nature of their world is appearing. At the Black Hills Institute, dinosaur hunter Terry Wentz examined Sue before she was locked away by the FBI. He recalls injuries he found in her bones.
Well, Tyrannosaurus rex had a very violent, hard life. I mean, they fought a lot, and we can tell that because of the things we found with, like Sue, for instance, the Tyrannosaurus rex from Faith area. When I was working on the rib, one of the ribs had a big mass of extra bone growth on it. Real weird looking. It didn't look like a rib at all. It had just a big mass of bone on it, extra bone, from an injury. Way down inside of that injury was a piece of Tyrannosaurus rex tooth. That rib had been bitten into by another T-Rex. And she also had another very interesting injury that astounds scientists when they see it. That is, she had a broken leg. And Sue survived that injury. It actually healed.
With a broken leg, Sue could not have hunted for food. Perhaps a mate fed her while she convalesced. Could a fearsome T-Rex also be a kind partner? Maybe, but in the end, it was another tyrannosaur that caused Sue's death.
The last injury that Sue had didn't heal. She was literally bitten in the back of the head by another T-Rex, and it killed her. He bit in the back, crushed her skull on top, and just ripped out the lower jaw. It was just ripped right out, and you can kind of tell it looked like the flesh on the front of the jaw actually held it in place, but the whole back of the jaw was just ripped right out.
Some meat-eaters mutilated each other, perhaps while defending their turf. Others were wounded in pursuit of prey. Bob Bacher has found evidence that the mightiest hunters of the Jurassic period, the allosaurs, faced menacing adversaries.
This particular allosaur has a wound inflicted in a battle with a plant eater. It's right here. There's a deep, penetrating wound which went all the way through the bone and produced an open, oozing abscess that lasted for months. Every time this critter sat down, it probably went, whoo! Who made the wound? Probably the rear end of a stegosaurus, where there are massive spikes. The crime probably went like this. Here's an allosaur, here's a stegosaur with spikes, and whack.
As the slow work of freeing their secrets from the rock continues, the true lives of the meat-eating dinosaurs are coming to light. While there's no doubt they were horrifying monsters, scientists are discovering that they were like nearly all creatures that have inhabited Earth. They struggled in their own unique ways to survive, to feed themselves, to care for their young, and to protect their kind. As more new discoveries are made and more bones interpreted, the killer dinosaurs are becoming more fascinating than ever. dinosaurs ruled the Earth for 150 million years, surviving, evolving, flourishing. Then mysteriously, they vanished. To find out why, scientists search the void of outer space. They comb the hot sands of the desert. And they plumb the depths of the ocean. Some believe the answer is locked up in chunks of amber. Everywhere they look, they're finding compelling clues about why the Earth was once ruled by dinosaurs. And then there were none. 65 million years ago, the world was teeming with dinosaurs. But then an unimaginable disaster happened. A giant asteroid came screaming toward Earth at 60,000 miles per hour. It burst through the atmosphere and smashed into the planet. Fiery debris was thrown thousands of miles, causing death and destruction. Smoke and dust formed a giant cloud that enveloped the Earth, blotting out the sun and drenching the land with lethal acid rain. The planet was plunged into icy darkness. Photosynthesis stopped. Vegetation withered. In the gloom, plant-eating dinosaurs starved to death. The meat-eaters soon followed. In one swift, terrible catastrophe, the dinosaurs' 150 million-year reign came to an end. It's a compelling story and a popular notion. But is that the way it really happened? Many scientists believe it's only part of the story. They feel that an asteroid impact alone couldn't have caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. Their quest for a hidden lethal factor behind the extinction has led them to look in the most unlikely places, even the bottom of the ocean. Today, a research team is heading toward the coast of Mexico on board Juárez Resolution. Once an oil drilling ship, now converted into the world's biggest and most technologically sophisticated floating lab. University of Rhode Island oceanographer Haraldur Sigurdsson is taking his team close to the site of the asteroid impact, now partially buried beneath the sea. He's convinced that the only way the blast could have wiped out the dinosaurs was if it struck extremely rare terrain. To prove it, he's searching for something peculiar in the sediment where it hit, something that made the effects of the explosion more deadly to the dinosaurs than the impact itself. The team will use the ship's massive drill probe to bring up narrow columns or cores of sediment from the ocean floor. Each core consists of dozens of seabed layers that accumulated gradually over millions of years.
We're planning to drill at a number of sites in the Caribbean where we will recover cores from the sea floor about a mile down. that will provide us new information about the process of the impact and the environmental effects of this great meteorite impact.
Aboard are 10 state-of-the-art laboratories where the scientists will analyze the chemistry of the rocks and sand in the cores.
Boundary layer clay in it.
There's a lot of work ahead, but when they finish, Sigurdsson may finally have the answer to the dinosaurs' demise. It's a mystery scientists have been trying to figure out ever since dinosaurs were discovered. British naturalist Richard Owen coined the word dinosaur in 1842 and also came up with the first theory for why they died out. He believed that in the age of dinosaurs, there was a depletion of oxygen. The dinosaurs survived because they were like sluggish reptiles. Then somehow oxygen levels rose, favoring the faster-moving mammals, and the dinosaurs went extinct. But Owen's theory was little more than guesswork, and since Darwin had yet to publish his theory of evolution, most of Owen's contemporaries believed in a simpler notion, that the dinosaurs were wiped out by the biblical flood. As science progressed, geologists found evidence of numerous great floods and catastrophes in Earth's history, floods that the dinosaurs survived. At the turn of the century, another idea emerged, that the dinosaurs, like all other extinct creatures, were meant to die out and give way to more advanced forms. Throughout the 20th century, many theories were bounced back and forth. However, all had one thing in common with earlier ideas. They couldn't be supported by hard evidence. Then, in 1978, in a limestone gorge in central Italy, a geologist named Walter Alvarez made a discovery that took the dinosaurs' extinction out of the realm of guesswork. Alvarez noticed a strange thin dark line of clay between two layers of sediment, dating back roughly 65 million years. Below the unusual clay is limestone from the Cretaceous, a period in which the dinosaurs were thriving. Above it is the Tertiary period, when all the dinosaurs and many other life forms disappeared from the fossil record. Because the layer divides these two geologic periods, it's known as the KT boundary. The C was changed to K because C had already been used to describe another geological time period. Alvarez brought a sample of the thin clay layer back to the lab for analysis. There, his team discovered something strange. It had over 30 times the normal concentration of a rare metal called iridium. Stranger still, other researchers soon reported the same clay layer at sites around the world, always loaded with iridium. Then, with the help of his father, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and other colleagues, Alvarez came up with a daring new theory. Since iridium is rare on Earth's surface, but common in asteroids, he deduced that 65 million years ago, a 6-mile-wide asteroid slammed into the Earth and vaporized, showering the globe with clouds of iridium-rich dust and other debris. Because this phenomenon coincided with the extinction of the dinosaurs, they developed the now well-known scenario for the dinosaurs' sudden death by a killer asteroid. But critics were quick to point out that iridium at that level isn't found only in asteroids, it's also in the Earth's core. So maybe the dust clouds spewed from volcanic eruptions. Scientists have found evidence of extraordinary lava flows in India that coincide with the dinosaur extinction. But it's uncertain whether the eruptions were vast enough to cause worldwide extinction. Meanwhile, if Alvarez and his supporters wanted to prove their case, they needed to find a huge crater somewhere on Earth's surface. According to their calculations, it should be about 112 miles in diameter and 65 million years old. Soon, several candidates were spotted, one in Canada, another in Iowa. But the Canadian crater was too old, and neither crater was big enough. Then, in 1990, the elusive crater was finally discovered just off the coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, mostly beneath the Caribbean Sea. It was named the Chicxulub crater. Though the crater had been found, a crucial question remained. Was the impact alone enough to cause the extinction of the dinosaurs and half the life on Earth? The team aboard the Juarez Resolution is out to prove that it wasn't. Their leader, Haraldur Sigurdsson, thinks there was more to it. His team is here in the Caribbean Sea to explore sediments from the KT boundary that surround the submerged Chicxulub crater. They're hoping to find evidence that the rock layers hit by the asteroid were rich in sulfur, which would have worsened the aftermath of the explosion. The research ship will drill not into the underwater crater itself, but into several spots on its periphery. When the asteroid hit, it first threw out dense, fiery rock and debris for thousands of miles before the finer particles floated into the atmosphere. The heavier ejected material at the KT boundary is what interests Sigurdsson.
One of the objectives of our expedition is to drill into the seafloor in the Caribbean in order to recover material from the boundary layer or from the deposit that was ejected by this great impact.
The drill team pushes a pipe thousands of feet long through a hole in the bottom of the ship. On the end of the pipe is a drill bit with super hard tungsten carbide teeth that can chew through rock. A sonar beacon sends sound waves to the ship, guiding the drill into a cone already set on the seafloor. To reach a mile down, they have to assemble the pipe on board, linking 100-foot sections together one by one. Sand and rock layers beneath the ocean floor get pushed up the pipe to form a core that the scientists will study. To retrieve just one sample, it takes a total of 4 hours. When they pull the drill back to the surface, the core will have the same layers in the same order as the undersea rock itself. But the KT boundary layer they're looking for is thin, making it extremely difficult to locate beneath a mile of water. Will the team find it? There's no way of knowing until they get the core into the lab. The team aboard the Juarez Resolution anxiously awaits the retrieval of a core containing sediment from the seafloor. If it holds the crucial KT boundary layer, they'll begin to look for evidence that the killing power of the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs was amplified by its collision with sulfur-rich rocks. After the core is recovered and cut into manageable sections, it's sliced down the middle at the splitting station. Half will be saved for later study. The other half goes directly to the onboard lab.
Well, see what we got here. Looks like a great core.
Now, Haraldur Sigurdsson and his team can examine the core to see if it contains the dark clay boundary layer. The drilling was a success.
If this is the tertiary limestone,
The layer is right there in the middle of the core.
in order to pin that down.
Well, we need to get a sample from somewhere down in here. We should see, it might be in the upper part of this.
One end is from the Cretaceous period, when the dinosaurs were still alive. The other end is from the Tertiary, after they died out. And in between is the KT layer that marks the dinosaurs' last days on Earth. But Sigurdsson leaves nothing to chance. He has to be sure that he's really found debris thrown from the impact. For that, he'll study a sample under the microscope to look for the unmistakable signs of an asteroid explosion. The energy of such a blast is so enormous, it melts the underlying rock. Globs of liquid rock are flung into the sky. The molten rock cools as it falls to Earth. Some turns into tiny glass beads, or tektites, which fall like rain all around the Earth. At the same time, the blast shatters grains of the mineral quartz in a distinctive way. It's called shocked quartz. Under the microscope, they find the shocked quartz. It's clearly sheared and shattered by the force of the explosion. Then they find the distinctive glass beads, the tektites. The two discoveries prove they pinpointed the ejected material. Now Sigurdsson and his team can begin to analyze the tektites for sulfur content. Careful chemical analysis later shows that Sigurdsson found what he wanted. The tektites contain a high level of sulfur, indicating the asteroid struck sediment that was rich in a mineral called gypsum. According to Sigurdsson, the energy of the impact would have vaporized the gypsum into a huge cloud of sulfur dioxide. As it spread through the upper atmosphere, it changed into sulfuric acid. Particles of the sulfuric acid acted like trillions of lenses, reflecting the sunlight away from the Earth. The deadly veil would have blocked out sunlight to a greater degree than anyone imagined. For an entire year, the world must have been dark and frozen, leaving no chance for the dinosaurs to survive. It was an incredible twist of fate that the asteroid hit where it did. It was like a bomb hitting a powder keg. Even more astonishing, less than 1% of the Earth's crust has this kind of sulfur-rich rock. If the asteroid had hit almost anywhere else, the dinosaurs might have survived. In the ship's lab, the team finds evidence of the impact's effect on creatures that lived in the sea, where apparently even more life was wiped out than on land.
Here in the lab on ship.
University of Rhode Island paleontologist Stephen DeHunt put limestone from the core under a microscope.
If you take a look at the rock that's below the impact layer here, you see the skeletons of small animals that floated around in the surface ocean eating phytoplankton. This rock is composed almost entirely of their skeletons. We have in this picture probably 8 or 9 different varieties, same size.
But just a centimeter above the impact layer, a totally different world appears.
We see a rock that's just got a few scattered, lonely little individuals here and there. These 3 dots right here comprise the skeleton of one of the few species that actually survived the impact event. Before, the ocean was filled with all these other varieties. After the event, nothing left.
So an ocean teeming with life suddenly became barren and empty. One cosmic mishap forever changed life on Earth. To Sigurdsson, it all adds up to proof that a massive asteroid blasted into a bed of sulfur-rich sediments and wiped out ancient life on Earth in a flash. It's clear that the dinosaurs didn't stand a chance in the bitter aftermath of the impact. But exactly how close did the asteroid come to destroying all life on Earth? clues that reveal the magnitude of the devastation are buried in the bleak badlands of North Dakota. Here, summer temperatures reach over 100 degrees in the shade, and fierce storms whip up the sand. But scientists flock here because of its well-preserved record of the end of the dinosaur age. Today, a team is setting out to learn more about that record. Leading them is Kirk Johnson, a paleobotanist from the Denver Museum of Natural History. He's here to look at the fossil record of plants. An asteroid powerful enough to kill the dinosaurs would have also destroyed a tremendous amount of plant life. In the rocks, he has little trouble finding the thin, dark clay layer that marks the impact, the KT boundary.
This little thin layer here, it's about ½ an inch thick, it's dark gray to black, appears as though it was deposited in less than a year. It looks like it's the fallout layer from an asteroid impact that occurred in Mexico.
With the impact layer identified, Johnson and his crew search for plant fossils. To him, they can actually reveal more than dinosaur bones.
The plants that grew with the last dinosaurs actually tell you a lot more about the late Cretaceous period than the dinosaurs themselves, because plants are a much more integral part of the landscape. When you walk outside, for instance, what do you see? You don't see lots of animals running around. You see vegetation, plants, trees, grass.
To get a clear picture of what happened to the vegetation at the KT boundary, the team must find a wide sample of plant fossils.
We have to set the stage. We have to build the late Cretaceous world before we destroy it. And the destruction of that late Cretaceous world is what happened right at the KT boundary. And what we're trying to do here is reconstruct the vegetation, the landscape, the environments of the late Cretaceous, understand its climate. Then what we do is climb up the hill, we cross the KT boundary, we do the same thing in the early tertiary period, and we compare before and after.
The team first works in sediments from the late Cretaceous period, the time just before the impact. They'll soon find out what kind of landscape the dinosaurs roamed in and what happened to it after the asteroid hit. By finding plant fossils from below the KT boundary layer and comparing them to what's left above, paleobotanist Kirk Johnson and his team hope to discover the destructive power of the asteroid that caused the dinosaurs' extinction. As the soft rocks from the late Cretaceous layer are pried open, they reveal a variety of fossilized leaves. Impressions of plants that once provided food and shade for the dinosaurs are exposed for the first time in millions of years. Most are broadleafed, like relatives of avocado, cinnamon, and lotus plants. All are subtropical species. Even a palm tree turns up.
This is a 66 million year old palm frond. So we're looking at a fossil that was a tree 66 million years ago, and that means that 66 million years ago, North Dakota wasn't cold in the winters. It was warm in the winters, and it was warm in the summers. It was a subtropical climate.
In the final days of the dinosaurs, this part of North Dakota was a lush forest. And the soft sandstone the fossils are found in tells Johnson that a stream once ran through this area. The fossils formed when leaves dropped into the stream and were buried by sand. Over time, the stream dried up and sandy layers slowly turned to rock, while minerals entered into the leaves and turned them into fossils. What's left millions of years later is a record of the once green and steamy landscape that dinosaurs lived in. But then the asteroid hit, and everything changed.
After the boundary, the plant species diversity plummets. It's a real barren wasteland up there. I mean, it's still forests, but the forests have 5 or 6 different kinds of plants. Down here in the Cretaceous, 60 or 70 species of plants.
Having collected more than 20,000 fossil leaves from above and below the KT boundary, Johnson calculates that 80% of the plant life here disappeared after the impact. Proof that the asteroid wiped out not just the dinosaurs, but entire ecosystems. Still, a mystery remains. Many small creatures made it through the crisis. Unlike dinosaurs, their fossils appear above the KT boundary.
We find our crocodiles, alligators, turtles, snakes, lizards, and mammals, and birds, frogs, things like that. But all small animals, and one of the things that all small animals share, besides their small body size, is they have pretty large populations. So there's a lot more mice than there are elephants, for instance. And so that's one of the things that probably made the dinosaurs vulnerable, was the fact that they were large animals, and as a result had probably relatively small population size.
So, does a solution simply lie in the large numbers of little animals, guaranteeing that some would survive the harsh aftermath of the impact? Or was there something else going on? Even today, the puzzle of the dinosaurs' disappearance remains unsolved. Scientists still bitterly dispute the cause. The asteroid theory may be popular, but many don't accept it. By probing further, they've found clues hinting at other agents of death and offer explanations as to why some creatures survived. At the Tate Museum in Casper, Wyoming, one of paleontology's most original thinkers, Bob Bacher, has devised his own solution by looking at the big picture.
We dinosaur scientists have a KT fixation. There are conferences about the KT, there are books about the KT, there are TV programs about the KT. That's a bit of a mistake, because if you want to know why the dinosaurs died at the end of the Cretaceous, you got to put them in context. That wasn't the only ecosystem collapse. There were 5 or 10 or 15 others. You've got to study the KT by comparing it to the end of the Jurassic, and the end of the Triassic, and the end of the Permian, and the extinctions that hit animals long after the Cretaceous. Put the KT in context, and then you'll find out who killed T-Rex.
Besides the dinosaurs, there have actually been at least 5 mass extinctions throughout the history of our world. In fact, extinction seems to be the rule. Many scientists agree that 90% of all creatures that have ever lived are now extinct. Studying these mass extinctions, Bacher found that they all had something in common. He uses the Jurassic extinction as an example.
At the end of the Jurassic, this system collapsed. The top predators, the allosaurs, went extinct. Their prey, the brontosaurs, were nearly totally exterminated. The plant-eating stegosaurs became very rare. In the oceans, there were extinction. What did it? The pattern of dying is the same you see at the KT boundary, the end of the Cretaceous. In fact, every time there's an extinction on land, it happens the same way. The victim profile is the same. It's the big active predators and the big active plant eaters who die. There would be extinctions after the KT. There were extinctions before the Jurassic, and all of them have the same MO, modus operandi. You want to know why the allosaurs went extinct? You have to find the serial killer that attacks the land ecosystem.
What caused the large dinosaurs to die at the end of both periods? According to Bacher, every extinction has coincided with a drop in global sea levels. This left land bridges connecting previously isolated continents. Dinosaurs that were living on a single landmass could then easily spread from one continent to another, but they carried with them latent diseases from their own habitats. When they came in contact with groups of dinosaurs from new habitats, diseases would be transmitted. Without immunities to new diseases, one group would be killed off by an epidemic. Eventually, entire populations would collapse. But what about the smaller animals? According to Bacher, it was easy for large dinosaurs to roam long distances across land bridges, but difficult for small animals. Even a shallow river could block their progress. With the big dinosaurs gone, niches opened up for those who hung on. In the hills of Como Bluff, Wyoming, Bacher has found evidence of survivors of the Jurassic extinction, which shows a similar pattern to the extinction at the KT boundary.
The extinction of dinosaurs at the end of the Jurassic was an opportunity for other species. If you lived in fresh water, if you were a turtle or a crocodile, you enjoyed the event. Turtle evolution speeds up during this extinction time. And if you were something else, too, you enjoyed the event. If you were small and hot-blooded and furry, if you belonged to our class, the class Mammalia, your evolution, too, took advantage of this opportunity.
So each time an extinction occurs, opportunities are created for the survivors. For another scientist, the surviving creatures at the KT boundary provide evidence for another novel theory of the dinosaurs' demise. He believes they weren't killed by a sudden asteroid explosion or disease, but by something in the air.
Now we can just gently tease.
Every summer, paleontologist Keith Rigby of Notre Dame University comes to the Badlands of Montana to hunt for fossils.
Okay.
What he finds here tells a different story of the dinosaurs' extinction 65 million years ago.
We're looking right here at what some say is the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary, a black streak in the hillside right here. Some say this is where an asteroid hit the Earth, killed the dinosaurs, and everything was wiped out in more or less an afternoon. What we're finding out is that it's different than that.
Right there.
The startling evidence he's found is the product of extensive teamwork. His students and volunteers aren't looking for prize museum specimens. Instead, their goal is to collect thousands of tiny bone fragments and teeth from many creatures. These will allow Rigby to build a broad picture of entire animal populations. He thinks tracing how these populations changed over time is the best way to study the cause of the extinction. It's demanding work. Every day, his diggers shovel out a couple of tons of dirt. But this is no ordinary dirt. It comes from near the KT boundary and contains hundreds of small fossils. Some of the sacks are filled with sediment taken from below the boundary in the Cretaceous period. And others contain sediment from above in the Tertiary. Each is carefully labeled.
Out of it now.
The team hauls the bags to a nearby reservoir.
Go to the right.
Here, the contents of the sacks are emptied into strainers. Each layer is kept separate. Next, it's time to head for the water. The water rinses away the sand and clay so that only hard material remains. Mostly rock turns up, but tiny broken up fossil bones and teeth are also revealed. Back on dry land, the rocky debris is picked out, leaving only fossils. Finding these fragments is the hardest part of the work. The trick is knowing which are rock and which are fossil. It takes a discerning eye. Though the fossils aren't much to look at, there are lots of them from a wide range of ancient animals. Not only dinosaurs, but alligators, salamanders, turtles, even tiny mammals. Back in the lab, the bones are sorted according to whether they were found in Cretaceous or Tertiary layers. Then they're organized by species. This will give Rigby an indication of which animals survived the KT boundary event and which did not.
No, I'm just putting it up there.
By tracing the fate of a wide variety of animals, Rigby creates a kind of snapshot of the entire living world in the Cretaceous and Tertiary periods. If there was a sudden catastrophe, it should show up as a clean break in the fossil record of many species at the KT boundary. But in fact, Rigby has found just the opposite. His work shows that the dinosaurs' extinction unfolded slowly, too slowly for an asteroid to have been the cause, and was already underway long before the asteroid hit. What's more, Rigby discovered that the smaller animals that became extinct around the time of the impact did so gradually, not in one single swift moment. At the same time, other species survived unharmed. And most surprising, small mammals began to diversify and expand. So even though Rigby accepts that an asteroid hit the Earth 65 million years ago, he's convinced that other factors have already set the wheels of extinction into motion. In fact, according to Rigby, the entire idea of sudden extinction as seen in the rocks is misleading. A layer marking an extinction may be less than an inch thick, but could represent tens of thousands of years.
We've seen extinctions in the geologic record time and time again. They appear sudden in the geologic record, but this is thousands, tens of thousands of years to take to accomplish this sudden geologic event. It takes time. It appears suddenly in the geologic record, but in our frame of reference, in our lifetimes, it's many generations, 10,000, 100,000 years, condensed to appear in the geologic record as sudden, but in reality is quite a long period of time.
But if dinosaur extinction was already underway long before the asteroid hit, what caused it? Rigby and his colleagues have come up with a clever and controversial answer. He thinks the solution lies inside chunks of amber. But this is no Jurassic Park. He isn't trying to bring back the dinosaurs. He wants to figure out why they disappeared. Amber is formed from hardened pine resin, a protective substance found on the surface of trees. The sticky resin flows down the tree, trapping bugs, dirt, even bubbles of air. After a while, it solidifies, preserving everything inside. In its fossilized form, it's called amber. Rigby's team has dug up chunks of amber preserved inside layers of rock from the Cretaceous, the last period of the dinosaurs. What they're looking for is amber chunks that have bubbles trapped inside. The bubbles, they believe, contain the air breathed by dinosaurs millions of years ago.
The clues that we found so far are incredibly interesting. We found that the atmosphere of the last of the dinosaurs is dramatically different than what we have now.
Could the air that dinosaurs breathed be different from today's? To find out, Rigby sends off the chunks of amber from his dig site to a lab in Denver. There, Gary Landis, a geochemist from the United States Geological Survey, will release the air from the bubbles for the first time in millions of years.
It's nothing short of phenomenal. It's really exciting. I mean, to hold a piece of a capsule that contains air from 60, 70, 100 million years ago is phenomenal. It's thoroughly thrilling.
But how can Landis be sure the air inside the bubbles is really that old? The ancient air may have leaked out, or new air leaked in. To show that amber is airtight, Landis devised a test. First, he placed samples of amber inside a nuclear reactor. The radiation converts potassium, found naturally in the amber, to the gas argon. Argon molecules are smaller than oxygen molecules and don't react with amber, so argon would escape from the amber more easily than oxygen. After monitoring the samples over a 3.5-year period, Landis found that the argon did not seep out, proving that amber is leak-proof. The next step is to release the air to analyze its contents and see what secrets it tells about the fate of the dinosaurs. To do that, Landis puts amber from the Cretaceous inside a vacuum chamber. The machine slowly cracks and crushes the amber, unlocking the ancient air trapped in the bubbles. He then uses a mass spectrometer to measure the different elements of the air and identify its components. The results show the air breathed by the dinosaurs during the Middle Cretaceous was made of the same elements as today's. But there was one crucial difference. The amount of oxygen was dramatically higher, at nearly 35%. The air we breathe contains only 21% oxygen. By analyzing air samples ranging from the early Cretaceous to today, Landis found that oxygen levels have gradually dropped. Landis and Rigby believe the drop in oxygen levels is what slowly killed off the dinosaurs, while sparing other creatures, including mammals. Their theory includes recent studies that suggest dinosaurs may have lacked a diaphragm and relied on their giant chest muscles to flex their rib cages in order to breathe. The method was inefficient, but in an oxygen-rich environment, that wasn't a problem. As the air became thinner, however, the dinosaurs began to suffocate.
They were unable to move as rapidly and unable to chase down and make their kills in food. They were less capable of migrating to new pastures for grazing, for feed. And you might even speculate that an animal having difficulty breathing enough to maintain its normal activity would be far less interested even in sex and reproduction.
Meanwhile, small mammals prospered. They had a muscular diaphragm beneath their lungs that helped them breathe the oxygen-depleted air. Smaller reptiles without diaphragms hung on because of their lower metabolic needs. But what caused the oxygen level to drop? According to Rigby and Landis, in the middle period of dinosaurs, the Jurassic, Earth's land masses were rapidly shifting, causing great volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. The violent activity pumped large amounts of carbon dioxide into the air, which the trees converted to oxygen. It was a lush, oxygen-rich environment in which the dinosaurs thrived. Then, in the Cretaceous, land mass movements slowly settled down. With fewer eruptions, less carbon dioxide was spewed. Plant life withered, and oxygen levels dropped. Slowly, the dinosaurs died out. By the time the asteroid hit, the damage was already done. While the oxygen theory is controversial, many paleontologists agree that slow-acting, complex environmental changes contributed to the dinosaurs' demise. Even so, it can't be denied that dinosaur remains vanish from the fossil record at the same place that marks an asteroid impact, and evidence continues to mount that links the two events. Vast craters that scar the Earth's surface show that debris from space has pummeled our planet more than once. Scientists who keep an eye on the far reaches of space consider the idea of a killer asteroid wreaking havoc on our planet as a very real threat even today. Could the human race become just another statistic on the extinction chart? Could a giant asteroid come flying out of the sky and wipe humanity from the face of the Earth? Are we doomed to suffer the same fate as the dinosaurs? Some scientists are taking the threat seriously. At Kitt Peak Observatory near Tucson, Arizona, Jim Scotty is one of the astronomers who run a project called Space Watch. The team operates a telescope that keeps an eye out for asteroids and comets approaching Earth. Scotty has seen enough of them to be worried. To recognize impending disaster as early as possible, he bathes his telescope with liquid nitrogen to minimize distortion. The telescope automatically rotates throughout the night, constantly scanning the skies for asteroids or comets that might be headed our way. The view is recorded by a sensitive electronic camera attached to the telescope. The images are fed into a computer, which picks out the fast-moving asteroids against the background of stationary stars and planets.
On our computer screen, the slower-moving main-belt asteroids are indicated by flagging them with boxes and numbers indicating where the object is in the current image and was in the previous two images. Our computer software finds literally hundreds of main belt asteroids every night, but we're after the fast-moving asteroids that are potential Earth-crossing asteroids.
So the Space Watch team gets worried only if the computer tracks a rogue asteroid that's been kicked out of the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and is heading toward Earth. They're finding about 3 a month. What are the chances we'll get hit? In fact, meteors, commonly known as shooting stars, hit us all the time. They're pieces of space debris smaller than an asteroid, but anything up to the size of a house will burn up in the atmosphere. A 100-foot asteroid strikes about once a century. That's what blew out Meteor Crater near Flagstaff, Arizona, 50,000 years ago. As for a 6-mile-wide dinosaur killer, fortunately, scientists think it's a rare event, maybe once every 100 million years. But there's another threat to worry about: comets. These icy masses don't orbit the sun in a well-defined belt like the asteroids do. Many swing far out to the edge of the solar system beyond Pluto. They're fast-moving, so they can appear out of deep space with relatively little warning.
An object the size of the dinosaur killers, something like 10 or 20 kilometers in diameter, would be visible to our telescope with our current technology probably for only about a year or two.
Astronomers only had a 16-month warning when fragments of comet Shoemaker-Levy were spotted heading toward Jupiter. In July 1994, their telescopes recorded the impacts. The biggest was equal to a 1 million megaton bomb, leaving an impact site the size of planet Earth. What could we do if we only had a few months' notice of such a cataclysmic threat? With present technology, there's not a lot we can do. There are plenty of ideas about how to defend ourselves, like sending a nuclear bomb into space to blow it up.
But no matter what you do, you don't want to blow the asteroid to smithereens. That's not going to help you, because instead, you're not going to vaporize the asteroid, you're going to make it into a big rubble pile. And it's still going to hit the Earth.
It may take a more subtle approach to nudge an asteroid out of the way, maybe using microwave beams or solar sails. The Spacewatch scientists think we should be trying to solve the problem.
Dinosaurs lasted for well over 100 million years, and they endured at least one other big impact event. But during all that time, they never quite got around to building an asteroid deflection system. So look what it got them. It got them fossilized.
Even if humans had been around at the time of the dinosaurs to develop Star Wars technology, we might not have saved them. Though new evidence strongly suggests that an asteroid was the agent of death, the dinosaurs may have already been on the way out, endangered by millions of years of global change to which they couldn't adapt fast enough. Or perhaps they dropped in droves from disease. For now, the dinosaurs' extinction remains a compelling mystery. But scientists are learning more about the forces of nature that caused it. Maybe one day they'll put all the pieces together and in the process gain insight about our own future.